Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining the Village Board meeting for August 9th, 2022. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Lana, roll call, please.
Mayor DeBold.
Here.
Trustees Brockman.
Here.
Carroll.
Here.
Chapman.
Here.
Kirkland.
Here.
Luciano.
Here.
And Selfridge.
Here.
All right, we do have a quorum for this evening. Our first item will be we are going to have a public hearing this evening. To start with the public, we will open the public hearing. The attorney is going to give a brief overview. From there, we will move over to the economic director, Ms. Engel. She will give a presentation on the project from the petitioner. We will then move over to the petitioner. They have the opportunity to present as well. We will then move into public comment. I apologize, prior to moving into public comment, the clerk does have some emails that she did receive. We will have those read into the record. We will then move into the public comment section. As your name is called, I ask that you come to the podium, spell your name so we have it for the record, and we will read you an oath, and you have the microphone to go ahead and address the petitioner and the board at that point through the public hearing. Once the public is done addressing from that side, it'll go to the village board for discussion, and then at that point, we will close the public hearing and move on to the regular order of the village business. All right. With that, I defer to the attorney to go ahead and start.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the board. My name is David Silverman. I'm the attorney for the Village of Shorewood, and I have worked with staff to prepare an amendment to several annexation agreements and also a redevelopment agreement that's the subject of this public hearing tonight. The property consists of approximately 24.2 acres. We've actually learned that there are several more acres out there than originally thought through a survey. So that is the amount of acreage that's there rather than the approximately 17 that we had originally discussed. This property is currently subject to 2 annexation agreements and 2 PUD ordinances that have been on the books for a number of years. If the board approves this agreement tonight, it will remove from those 2 PUD ordinances and from those 2 annexation agreements this property, which consists of approximately 24 acres and is located near the northwest corner of Windstone, the northeast corner of Windstone Drive and Route 52. Natalie will point it out in more detail during her presentation. The agreement is between the Village of Shorewood and 2 limited liability companies. The first is called the Hamptons of Shorewood Limited Liability Company, and the second is called Granite Shorewood Limited Liability Company, and they currently together own the property that's subject to the annexation agreement. So I'll go over the highlights here for the members of the board and also for the members of the public so you know what it is we're talking about. But I have to tell you that probably the major thing that this agreement does, as I mentioned before, it takes the property out of those 2 existing agreements and the 2 existing PUDs and creates a new PUD ordinance. So Natalie, along with other staff at the village, has put together a planned unit development ordinance, which she will discuss in detail after I'm finished, and that PUD ordinance really pulls together all the aspects of this development. So if this agreement is approved, it incorporates the terms of that PUD ordinance, and that PUD ordinance is just like any other zoning ordinance of the village. It's enforceable, and the village has a great deal of power with regard to that. The agreement's for a period of 20 years from today. The agreement does several things. As I mentioned, it approves the PUD ordinance, or it better stated, it requires the village to approve the PUD ordinance. It requires the village to approve a preliminary plat, which Natalie will show in her presentation. A preliminary plat is the first stage of a subdivision. What happens in the subdivision process is first a preliminary plat is approved, and that's followed up by final plats, and that's all spelled out by village code and also by state law. So if the agreement is approved, it approves the preliminary plat, that's attached as an exhibit both to the agreement and to the, or as an exhibit to the PUD ordinance and the agreement. Then the next provision of the agreement provides that the village will approve any final plats which substantially conform with the preliminary plat. And that's the way the process works in all subdivisions. The preliminary plat is first approved, and then the final plat brings with it more detailed engineering and more of the specifics with respect to the development. So first thing is the preliminary plat, next is the final plat, which would get approved. We will require in this agreement, as part of the final plat, that all the mixed-use buildings, all the buildings on the property except for the mixed-use buildings, will have permanent index numbers assigned to each dwelling unit. The mixed-use buildings, as Natalie will describe, are the two buildings which are over towards Windstone Drive that have commercial on the main floor and residential on the top. The agreement sets forth a phasing plan, which is also in the planned unit development ordinance. The development will take place in phases, and there are things that have to be done according to the phasing schedule that's set forth in the agreement and the PUD, so that the developer can't move through the subdivision without completing the first components in terms of the public improvements and things like that in the prior phase. And Natalie, I think, is going to talk about that in a little bit more detail as she gets into the PUD ordinance. The village years ago entered into what's called a recapture agreement with a company called Kipling Development, which is also was at that time primarily owned, I believe, by Mr. Maddox. And that recapture agreement allowed for a sewer main to be extended from the south side of town essentially up to here, served the folks in Del Webb, serves the village hall here, and it will serve a number of acres of other property. And Mr. Kipling extended that sewer line, or excuse me, Mr. Maddox and his companies extended that sewer line further than it had to be extended to serve those developments, and also made it much bigger so that sewerage from both directions could then flow into that and then go over to the Joliet wastewater treatment plant. Since then, the village has taken another look at it, and there may be changes in where sewer may flow to, and we thought it was a good idea to get out from under that recapture agreement. So the village has agreed to essentially buy out the interest of Mr. Maddox, who now owns that agreement. So the village will waive the sewer connection fees in this Hamptons development. In exchange for that, Mr. Maddox will assign the recapture agreement to the village. So all the money that would normally have gone to Mr. Maddox under the recapture agreement can now come to the village, and also the village, if they want to utilize the sewer lines in different ways, will have the ability to do that. So the village gains a great deal of flexibility in how it deals with future developers and how it deals with its sewerage in the future. The agreement requires that all the buildings on the property be connected to both the sewer and water systems, and each unit will be individually metered. In the case of the rental properties, if the bills aren't paid for the sewer and water, then the owner will be required to step in and make those payments, and we have provisions for the notice to the owner. There's also currently special service areas on the property, so we will work with the developer, and we talked about this a little bit at the zoning board the other night. We'll work with the developer to remove the properties from those special service areas and to create a new special service area, which will step in case the common area improvements in this development are not maintained. The village can levy a tax against the property, so it will, only against this property and not other properties, so that it can be maintained at no expense to village taxpayers. Some of the streets will be private, a couple of them will be public, so there's provisions in the agreement to deal with that. Also, multi-use trails are set out in the plan unit development, and those multi-use trails will be constructed with each phase of the development. The agreement addresses stormwater facilities. Currently, there exists on the property enough stormwater capacity to handle phases 1 and 1A in the development. And once the developer proceeds into Phase 2, more additional stormwater detention will have to be constructed, and that will be the lake system that eventually connects together with these lakes and becomes one stormwater maintenance system. The village will have the ability, if they want to take ownership of that lake and also to take ownership of the trails, and the village will decide whether to do that or not at the time of the final plat. The streets and highways are all constructed at the cost and expense of the developer. The private streets and the public streets will all be built to the specifications set forth by the village. The other section, which is a bit of a deviation from the code, involves the fees and contributions section, and the variances from the code are this. One, that the developer will pay 50% of the park contribution fee, and it was the opinion of staff as we met with the developer and worked through this agreement that because they're providing a substantial number of trails, open spaces, and also a clubhouse on the property for use by its residents, that they will not have such a severe impact on the village's park system, so we thought it was appropriate to reduce that fee by half, or to recommend to the board to reduce that fee by half. We've set forth a calculation method for determining what the value of the buildings will be, so that we'll know what the values of the buildings will be. It's based upon an international code, and that will determine the amount of the building permit fees as they come in. So there's no guessing as to what the actual value of the building is. We'll use a reference to a code. The other incentive, if you will, is that the village will provide MXU units for the water system and the water meters at its cost. So there will be no markup on those because there'll be a lot of them out there. And these, the village ordinances are frozen in terms of amount for 5 years, and after that they pay whatever applicable according to village standards. So those are the most important terms of the annexation agreement. There are a lot of, kind of what I would call legal boilerplate that's in all of our form agreements, but those, I believe, are set forth the terms which are applicable to this property.
Thank you. Prior to moving on, for the folks that are outside, the large conference room does have chairs set up. The same information is just being broadcast in there, so you do have the ability to sit down, just so people are aware of that. So I wanted to make certain everybody is aware. You don't have to stand. There is room to sit. With that, we will move over to Natalie Engel. She will start her presentation.
Thank you. We do have a presentation. It should be appearing on the screen any minute now. I apologize to those of you who were at Wednesday's public hearing. A lot of this information will be a bit repetitive, but there were a number of people who weren't there, so we do want to go through all of the details of the plan. The Hamptons is a mixed-use project, as Dave mentioned, and it's located at the northeast corner. It's located at the northeast corner of Whinstone and Jefferson Street. The aerial on the screen shows where it is. Basically, it's south and east of Town Center, southwest of Fox Bend, northwest of Walnut Trails, north of Shorewood Glen, and northwest of Hunt Club. It is bound on Jefferson Street, I apologize. It's bound on the south by Jefferson Street and by a 7.3 acre commercial property, which is shown in red. That property is owned by a different corporation, Granite Shorewood LLC. The property is bound on the north by an undeveloped section of Town Center called Town Center 2, and there will be a large pond, as Dave mentioned, to the north of the property. It'll connect essentially where the Village Hall pond is and where the ponds are behind People's First Bank, so that blue arrow is meant to describe that. As part of the project, as Dave mentioned, we'll be amending 2 planned unit developments. Town Center 1 is shown in red. That includes the existing Town Center development and a small portion of this property. Town Center 2 is largely undeveloped. It's another part of the Shorewood Town Center development, and then the area that will essentially be taken out of those 2 planned unit developments and would be called the Hamptons is shown in yellow. Over the past several months, the village has been working on a comprehensive plan. We've met many of you along the way at various events where we've been soliciting input and ideas from the residents. What you told us is, for the most part, you like living in Shorewood. People like their neighborhoods, and they appreciate the distinctive architecture and quality construction. They think the area is peaceful, and they like having access to retail amenities. People saw a need for housing for different age groups, but had no interest in typical apartment complexes. The residents love the river and the paths, but they were frustrated because there are areas where those paths don't connect, and it's difficult to get places like to Town Center Park and to the river. People enjoyed the parks, and they attend events at the town center. When asked what they wanted to see in the community, lots of people told us they'd like to see higher-end restaurants, they'd like cute shops, and they coveted an area similar to downtown Plainfield or downtown Naperville, and gave some examples like that. Ed Maddox approached the village several years ago, and he expressed a desire to build some townhouses at the southwest corner of Whinstone and Jefferson. That did not go over well. Several people expressed concern that they did not think that was an appropriate place. The village at that point did hear many comments that maybe this site would be better. Nonetheless, we were still skeptical about approving an apartment complex. Over the last couple of years, we've been approached by many people who wanted to build multifamily dwellings on this property, and we've turned them away unless they were willing to do something more creative, more special. When Mr. Maddox approached us on this site, we told him the same thing. We were clear that a typical apartment complex wouldn't fly, and brought up the community input and desires and asked him, to look at his plan and to see whether he could incorporate some of those elements. This parcel is uniquely situated. On one hand, it's on Jefferson Street, which we all know is a busy street, automobile-oriented and suited for automobile-oriented businesses that you would drive to. On the other hand, it's across from Village Hall, it's near the Town Center Park, it's near the splash pad. So we looked at the plan kind of in two different phases. One would be, or two different areas. One would be more automobile-oriented types of businesses, like the red you see along Jefferson, and then Whinstone Drive, which would be more pedestrian-friendly. The development has three different types of buildings. The purple buildings are mixed-use buildings. The teal buildings or green buildings at the north are townhome-style buildings, and the orange buildings are rental homes. I'm going to go through each of those in a little bit more detail. These are the mixed-use buildings. They are the ones that were shown in purple on the plan, and there are two of these buildings, and they face Whinstone. This is the first of the buildings. The ground floor is 13,500 square feet, and it will be retail space. There are 2 stories of residential above with 11 apartments on each floor. The building was designed to look like it belongs in a small town downtown or small town Main Street. When architects look at these types of buildings, they always say they have a retail bottom, a decorative middle, which in this case would be the residence, and an ornate top, which is how these were designed. The ground floor will have typical retail storefront with large windows and doors to access the stores. The building will be brick and will have 3 different types of hardy plank siding. There are designated sign areas because we wanted to keep it pedestrian scale and not be overpowered by any signs. There's various details like the gables you see and the decorative ironwork and whatnot. Then the roof of the building it's a fairly fancy roof with some gables and some dormer windows, but essentially it's a false roof that's been designed like a parapet wall so that it will hide all of the mechanical equipment. So in this picture, you'll see that's essentially from a bird's eye view. So everything will be screened, it'll look nice. Because of the location and because it's going to be so prominent, we wanted to make sure that all of the buildings had what we call 360-degree architecture. And it didn't just look pretty from the front, but it had to look pretty from all sides. So these are the elevations they've come up with, where essentially all of the sides of the building incorporate the stone, the hardy plank, and the nice architectural details. On the top of this picture, you'll see the commercial footprint. It's 13,350 square foot of commercial space. The space is 70 feet deep, which is a good depth for stores. Sometimes in buildings like this, people build them too shallow, and stores don't come because they can't lay out their typical footprint. In this case, it's nice and deep, and it should work quite well. People will come into the stores from the front of the building, although some may have back doors as well. but then the staff and the residents will park behind the building. And you can see in purple, there's the residential lobby, and in gray are the two staircases leading upstairs. The lower plan shows the apartments that'll be on the second and third floor. Each of the units will have 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, in-unit laundry, fire sprinklers, and individual mechanical equipment like furnaces and air conditioners. They're going to range in square footage from 1,010 square feet to 1,419 square feet. This is a site plan for the building. Basically, as I mentioned, visitors will park in front, and residents and staff will park in back. Deliveries will be behind the building. They've left a large sidewalk area in front because we think this is a really good place for restaurants with outdoor dining and things like that. People like to see that, and they'll mention in their presentation they've got a couple of restaurants and a market that have signed up. I believe it's 2 Italian restaurants and a small Italian market deli that'll go in there. The northernmost building is shown as it will be constructed. The southern one is shown the same, but it may be tweaked a little bit if there were a specific user who wanted to come in, let's say a restaurant who wanted an enclosed dining area or something. So if the developer wanted to tweak that, he would have to come back and ask for permission. And then we wanted to have a cap in that building, so we capped it at a maximum of 33 apartments. So it could be about 1.5 times the size of the first building. The next one we'll discuss are the teal buildings on the top. They're townhome-style buildings. And these are a unique concept that we haven't really seen in the area. But they're basically, they're a for-sale product. They're geared for seniors and empty nesters. Every unit has a garage, it has a front door, and the unit goes through to the back. But unlike a typical townhouse is not two stories. There will be 4 units on the top floor and 4 units on the ground floor. This is designed to be maintenance-free, so several of you, I think, live in Shorewood Glen. You understand that, where people are mowing the lawn, they're cutting the grass, they're raking the leaves, but you still own your unit, and it will be similar in this situation. These buildings as well have lots of stone and brick on them. They have hardy plank siding in a couple of different ways. Nice architectural features like high-pitched roofs, dormer windows, decorative doors, and stuff like that. And these will be visible from the street, but as you'll see as we go further along, they'll also be visible from the paths along the pond. So we wanted to make sure that they were very attractive, and we're going to require all of the same elements on the back. Because there's no garage doors, one could even say that they probably are a little bit fancier on the back. These will have, so there are 4 units on the ground floor, 2 units on the top, 4 units on the ground floor and 4 units on the top floor. Each building will have 2 one-bedroom units, 4 two-bedroom units, and 2 three-bedroom units. There will be several options available for homeowners, such as a fully accessible option if somebody has mobility issues and wanted to take a ground floor unit. The final type of building is the orange area we see. These are the rental homes. There are 148 rental homes arranged in 12 to 16 unit 2-story buildings. They're shown in orange on the plan, as I mentioned. These are kind of built with that modern sort of farmhouse look. They'll have stone, they'll have board and batten and horizontal siding and lots of details. These will be designed like condominiums. Every home will have its own entryway, where if you have a ground floor unit, you come in and you walk right into your apartment. If you have a second floor unit, you have your own access from outside. You open the door, you go up the stairs, and then you're in your unit. As Dave mentioned, they'll each have individual property identification numbers with the county. There are 3 different layouts and sort of deviations between the top and second floor. They range in area from 1,100 square feet to 1,267 square feet. Each of the units has 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, in-unit washer and dryer, individual HVAC, a private balcony or patio, or fire sprinklers. And I guess I should have mentioned the townhome-style buildings have fire sprinklers as well. Basically, everything in this development will be sprinklered and will have fire alarms. They're going to have some very strict standards in terms of parking, window coverings. You won't be able to hang sheets on your windows. Everything will have to be either a white drape or a white blind. And then they have standards in terms of what can be kept on the balconies. You won't be able to keep your bikes and your grills and stuff like that on the balconies. And then each unit will have their own individual large storage closet off of their patio or their balcony where they can store those things, especially the seasonal items. This is the site plan. There's outdoor parking spaces for these units as well as detached garage spaces. The siding on the garages is hardy plank. There are 277 outdoor parking spaces and 68 indoor ones. This is a 2.3 parking space per dwelling unit ratio, so that's actually fairly high for multifamily. Usually, 1.6, 1.7 is about average for multifamily, so we feel that these are well parked. And as you can, I'll show you the site plan one more time. Well, never mind, I'll go back. Okay, so essentially, if you recall the site plan, there is a large swath of commercial on Jefferson Street. There will also be commercial and mixed use along Whinstone. So these won't be very prominent along the street. There's only really 3 of these buildings that will show, so it'll look like a nice mixed development as we go forward. The other thing you'll be able to see from the street is the Clubhouse. The Clubhouse is going to essentially be like the entry feature, and it's going to be a stately building with a lot of the same materials. And in there, there'll be a rental office or a sales office. There will be a room that people can rent out. They're going to have Wi-Fi because they think that there's going to be a number of people who are going to be interested in the 2-bedroom units because they work from home, and they may not have needed an office before, but now they do. And if you've worked from home, you know if you sit and stare at those 4 blank walls and talk to nobody, it gets tiring. So they think that people will want to go and hang out at the Clubhouse and do a little bit of work, talk to their neighbors. There will also be a pool that looks out onto the pond, and there will be a dog run. They think that empty nesters, seniors, and likely childless couples will live in this area, and they think that more likely than not, it'll be people who have no children, maybe a dog, so that's kind of what they've accommodated in their open space area. At the public hearing, we did have a number of questions about the school impact and about the schools. So I wanted to go into a little bit more depth here. When we look at school impact and park impact, we use figures from a 1996 study done by a company in Naperville called Illinois School Consultants. Most municipalities use this study, although we think it is a little bit dated. We think that there's probably fewer kids than it projects that will come into these, but if you do the math, it looks like it'll be 50 students that will be generated by this development. Any student in this development in high school will go to Minooka High School, and we estimate that there will be about 13 students going to Minooka High School. And then it's odd, but the different plan unit developments, which were essentially created from lines of farms that used to be there, they go to different school districts. So everything on the left side will go to Minooka grade school and junior high, and everything on the right side will go to Troy. So we estimate that there will be 11 new students who go to Minooka and 26 new students to go to Troy Middle School and grade school. When we issue building permits, the developer is required to pay 2 fees. They have to pay a fee that's supposed to cover the land to build a school, or a fee that people can put in the bank for when they need to buy land for a school. And they need to pay an impact fee based on bringing new kids into the school system. We estimate that they'll have to pay approximately $125,000 in these fees. The most significant impact is a positive one, in our opinion, for the school districts, and that is the fact that they would be bringing on some fairly high-value buildings that will, in turn, pay a lot of taxes. It's difficult to estimate the number of taxes, the amount of taxes in this development, because they've got some unique buildings. There aren't a lot of these townhome-style buildings in the area. There aren't a lot of mixed-use buildings. So we did what we could to come up with estimates. Being really conservative, I came up with an estimate of about $630,000 in tax money that will go to the schools every year. Mr. Maddox came up with just over $1 million. The answer's somewhere in between. I'm sure I'm too conservative. He's probably too generous, or probably, in his opinion, conservative because he has to pay the taxes. But we think that there will be a positive impact from a tax perspective on the schools. As I mentioned, the future retail space on Jefferson is not owned by this company. It's owned by Granite Shorewood LLC. It's not part of this development, but just wanted you to know that it's there. And it's really going to sort of impact the look of the subdivision because you'll really see that as you're coming down the street, and only really 3 buildings in the corner of one of the mixed-use buildings will be seen from Jefferson. We think that this development, if it's passed, will make this retail space more valuable. The developer is going to be putting in roads that run behind it. He's going to be putting in the turn lane. He'll put in sewer and water lines and whatnot. So it'll make it easier for somebody who wants to build a restaurant or a dry cleaner or something to come in and develop that space. As I mentioned, the property is fairly well parked. I pointed out the various parking here. Purple shows the mixed-use buildings in front of and behind the buildings. Orange shows the rental homes, which has parking in parking lots and in detached garages. One of the questions that came up after the public hearing from one of the residents was the idea of, electric vehicles and the fact that those are becoming more popular. The developer did confirm that the garages will be outfitted so they can put charging in for electric vehicles, as well as a few spaces in the parking lot. And then in blue, those are the townhome-style dwellings. They're going to have a single-car garage and a parking space on their driveway. Another thing that we discussed a lot at the last meeting was vehicular access, so we've gone into a little bit more detail here. Pointing out the 2 access points to the subdivision. On the bottom right is the access from essentially Del Webb Boulevard and Jefferson, which will turn north into the subdivision. The developer will be putting in a right-hand turn lane and essentially a left-hand turn lane off of Jefferson. I'll go into that in a little bit more detail in a minute. And then on Town Center Boulevard, that will be improved. There'll be a right-hand turn lane into the site. There will be left-hand turn lanes, and they'll also be constructing a crosswalk. And as part of the crosswalk, they're going to have a refuge. So if you're traveling with somebody who's slow, say a kid on a tricycle or something like that, and you want to pause in the middle, you can pause in the median before going all the way. Makes it a little bit safer. What's shown in red is sort of our hope, and that's the idea of a traffic light at Whinstone. The village has budgeted to put in a traffic light in Whinstone as soon as we can. As we stand now, we don't have enough traffic to warrant a traffic light at Whinstone. When we go to IDOT, they look at the numbers, and if there's not enough traffic counts, you typically don't get the light. As part of this development, they did a traffic study, and they estimated how much traffic would come from this development. Our engineers have reviewed it, and they think it looks favorable in terms of getting a light. So if this passes, what we'll do is we'll come back at the next meeting and say to the village board, we'd like you to give us the go-ahead to go ahead and start these studies so that as soon as we've got the warrants, we go to IDOT and they give us the light. So we're very hopeful for that. We often get questions about the idea of taking town center, really Whinstone, and punching through to the north to get out to Black Road. From our perspective, although that will help to alleviate traffic, it may help to, it's one of those don't cut off your nose to spite your face. We're a little bit concerned that if you go north and you alleviate some of that traffic, we'll never get enough counts at Whinstone. So we've kind of got to do the Whinstone traffic signal, and then in our next phases of development, then we'll look to go north to Black Road. The plan also calls out the width of the roadways. Town Center Boulevard will be a 30-foot back-to-back width, which we think is a good width for two-way traffic without parking, so we call that out in the plan. Hamptons Lane will be 30-foot back-to-back as well. Hamptons Lane is a private road. Town Center Boulevard and Del Webb Boulevard are public roads. At the last public hearing at the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, several people brought up the question of, can you even call a road Del Webb Boulevard because it's not a Del Webb development? We're going to look into that. From a safety perspective and navigating to places, it's generally better to keep the street names the same and not to change them in the middle of the road. But if there's a problem with that, we'll change it. Either way, we don't think we'll have any properties addressed on that street, so it shouldn't be too much of a problem. I'm going to go in quite a bit more detail about the traffic because I know there were a lot of questions. This is a drawing that was prepared by Rudiger and Tonelli and Associates, Mr. Maddox's engineers, after our conversation. Basically, it talks about how people traveling along Jefferson will be able to go straight, turn into Shorewood Glen, or turn into Hamptons with dedicated lanes. I'll go into a little more detail on the next slide and show you exactly how that'll work. So this is basically a zoom in. So you've got the intersection there. Coming out of Shorewood Glen, right now, you have a dedicated left turn lane, so I've kind of highlighted that in red. And then you have a right turn lane, which will be you'll be able to turn right, or you'll be able to go straight if you wanted to go, say, to the stores in this Hamptons development. You're going to have the same situation on the north. So the red lane will be a left turn lane. If you want to turn east and go towards Route 59, you'll be in that lane. If you want to turn right and go towards the railroad tracks, or if you want to go straight to visit somebody in Del Webb or in Shorewood Glen, you would use the green lane. Pop those off there, and then we'll talk about traffic along Jefferson. So right now, Jefferson, you can go straight. That's highlighted in yellow. You can go into the left-hand turn lane and turn into Shorewood Glen. That will stay. What you see in blue on the top of the screen will be newly constructed. That will be a dedicated right-hand turn lane with a stacking area so that people will be able to, slow down in that area and then turn into the Hamptons. On the next slide, we'll see it'll basically be mirrored on the south side of the street. The blue, which is your right-hand turn lane into Shorewood Glen, will stay. The yellow will be the through lane if you're going to 59. And the red will essentially be a left-hand turn lane into the Hamptons. Right now, there's like a striped median that you're not supposed to drive on. That was designed to be wide enough to be able to accommodate a left-hand turn lane to go into the Hamptons, or to go into that property, because it was always expected that that would eventually be a four-way intersection. There will also be inbound lanes. So basically, as you know, right now, if you're going into Del Webb, Shorewood Glen, you've got 2 lanes to go in. Then there will be a lane to go into the Hamptons to the north. There will be a right in, right out, eventually to go into the commercial development. IDOT basically set all these locations when this area got developed, but we don't know exactly how the commercial property will develop. That will come back to the Plan Commission and the board. And then this is the overall plan. I hope that makes it a little bit simpler to understand. There's a number of pedestrian paths that are going to be connected. We're pretty excited about this because this is sort of one of our problem spots, right? We all joke about the bridge to nowhere behind People's First Bank. There are a lot of people who would like to be able to bike or walk to events at the town center, and they can't do that now. So when they go and build the pond, they'll be building a path along the south side of that, so you'll be able to walk from River Road, take that path by the pond, and go to the town center. There will also be a path built on the north side of Jefferson Street, so you can take the road eventually. And then there will be paths that go up Del Webb Boulevard and that go downtown Center Boulevard as well. Everything that's shown in red is an 8-foot asphalt path designed for pedestrians and bicycles. What's shown dotted is essentially things that will be done by other developers. But we've made sure that with this development, we'll have adequate connections so that people can get places without having to walk on grass or anything like that. What's shown in yellow is more of the internal circulation. In front of the townhomes, there will be a carriage walk along the street. There will be sidewalks and carriage walks along the parking lots and stuff for the rental buildings as well. So we're pretty excited that this will be able to connect some things for the neighborhood. This is the phasing plan. Mr. Silverman addressed this pretty well in his presentation, so I guess I'll just start with a couple of the key points. Phase 1 is 1 mixed-use building, 2 townhome-style buildings, and 2 rental home buildings. That will be accessed off of Windstone. They're going to do that first, and there's an existing small pond on the parcel. They'll be going to use that pond for this development, but before they can move on into the Phase 2, they're going to need to build a new pond, and there's really most likely to be that large pond north of the subdivision. So that will come next. The really exciting part of this development is going to be the clubhouse and the pool and all those open space areas. We understand that's important, so we've put kind of a trigger in the ordinance where they have to be well under construction with shovels in the ground, actively building the road system, including the extension of Del Webb Boulevard, the clubhouse, the parking spaces for the clubhouse, and the pool before they can get any permits in phase 3 and 4. And then they have to be totally finished with their construction, everything perfect and accepted by the village before anybody can move into phase 3 and 4. And I know that sounds repetitive, but basically you can start building once you start with the construction, and then you can move in once everything is totally done. If that makes sense. Here's the landscape plan. It's pretty much what you would expect. There are parkway trees on Windstone, parkway trees on all the streets within the subdivision. IDOT wouldn't let us put parkway trees in this location, so we've got some nice undulating landscaping with different types of trees along the north side of Jefferson Street on their property. Sorry, back that up a little bit. As you're going to Town Center Boulevard, on the north side, it's kind of a windy, meandering curve in and out of some landscaping, so it'll be a very pretty walk. And then they've got landscaping along the pond and around all the buildings. This is one of the rental home buildings, so it just gives you an idea of the type of landscaping. Where there's not walkways, there'll be nice trees and bushes. And then this is the landscaping around the mixed-use building. It's a little bit lighter, but that's because we think it's very important to have outdoor seating areas and things like that. The developer will also be putting in bike racks and benches and garbage cans and all of those fun things. In terms of the townhome buildings, we will be approving those at building permit. That's typically what we would do. Our standard is typically that you have to landscape the front. In this case, we think a little bit more landscaping is appropriate, so the developer has agreed to landscape all 4 sides of the building, which will look nice. There will be 2 signs in the project, both of them in the medians. There's a median along Windstone Drive, and the median is as you're coming off of Windstone Drive at Town Center, and then a median coming off of Jefferson Street. So this is basically the sign that he's proposed. More along the technical lines, like Mr. Silverman's presentation, we do have to list out everything that's not typical. In the PUD, we can make some exceptions to the zoning ordinance as long as they make sense for the plan, they're creative, they're used appropriately. So in this document, we just spell out, the residential uses that are allowed, the width of the roadway that we've permitted, the landscaping, the signage, phasing, and things like that. And I'm happy to go into details about that, but for the most part, I would just be recapping what I already talked about. When we were reviewing the plan, we looked to a couple of documents. The comprehensive plan for the village, which was adopted in 2007. We looked at the original PUDs, which originally called for the whole area to be commercial. And then we looked to a document created in 2018 for this area. Basically, this property has been around for 20 years in the development process. They came in, they started talking about it around 2000. The properties were annexed to the village in 2004, 2006. At one point, Kohl's was going to come. That fell through. There's been a whole bunch of conversations about what could be there, and we realized that it's not likely that it's going to be a large commercial property. So back in 2018, the village had a consultant come in, and they drew up some plans. This is the plan that they came up with on the screen, or at least some excerpts from it. And they talked about things like we're talking about this evening, with some multifamily dwellings, some mixed use with some retail, and sort of the same type of flavor as what we're proposing here. There's the site layout, just to have something up on the screen if you want to look at it and point to anything. But staff's reviewed it. We think that, given some of these good amenities, we think it's a good project and have recommended approval. We did have a public hearing on Wednesday before the Planning and Zoning Commission. They also recommended approval of the project.
Thank you. With that, I'll turn to the petitioner to go ahead and give your anything that you guys would like to add.
Great. Thank you, Mayor DeBold. Rod Tonelli from Rudiger Tonelli and Associates on behalf of the Hamptons and Mr. Maddox. And again, pleasure to be here tonight before you, Mayor and trustees, to talk about this. And appreciate all the work that Natalie put into her presentation. So she makes my job a lot easier because she's covered a lot of the content. But there's a number of things that I kind of want to just run through as briefly as I can to add a little more detail to the conversation. And I think I'll start where Natalie kind of ended, which is talking a little bit about the history of the property. And so many of you have known me in different ways over the years, and we and the village have all had a long history with town center. The idea of developing a town center or neo-traditional or new urbanistic development, these are some of the other planning kind of terms that we used, was first adopted in your 2 times ago comprehensive plan, I think in 2001, and then reiterated in 2007. And the idea was, again, to create a mixed use or walkable hybrid suburban scale development where we can have some urban amenities, something we can identify as the center of our community, where we could build civic buildings and civic park spaces. And so we believe that the plan we presented to you today is consistent with what's in your comprehensive plan. In 2004, you first approved the Town Center 1 annexation agreement and PUD. And again, it envisioned a higher mix of retail, but it had always envisioned a mix of civic, retail, and residential uses that would occur on that frontage. 2006, you approved the Town Center 2 addition, and same thing. The property along Jefferson, everything between the ponds and Jefferson was envisioned to be mixed use. Again, at the time, it was predominantly skewed towards more commercial and less residential. And then we had the 2009 amendment that contemplated the development of a Kohl's store at that site, which some work did begin on, but it never proceeded. And then, as all of you are aware, we had the Great Recession. And we've had a number of market-changing factors that have occurred since that time that have a dramatic impact on what we're able to envision being built in places and caused to be built in places. And so we can talk first about retail. The reason for the 2018 Town Center Plan Study that the planning consulting firm Ginkgo and Associates had prepared, and they've done this for a number of communities, is that we all had planned large commercial tracts along our arterial roadways and large collector roadways, envisioning continued big box retail development. And what we now know is that with the rise of e-commerce, the world of retailing has changed, and we need far less actual building square footage to meet our retail needs. Retail demands now are more in boutique, specialty, restaurant, local business spaces, more than the amount of big box or strip retail that we had planned kind of prior to that change in the market space. So the Ginkgo study in 2018 recognized that, and like many other communities, the recommendation was that we should retain some commercial frontage. That's the red area that you saw in the site plan, but the balance of it would best be suited to be used for mixed residential development. And as is always the standard here in Shorewood, and we're well aware of it, there's a high expectation as to your design expectations, what the architecture looks like, the quality of the buildings, the quality of the landscaping, the details that we put into the sites. And we think we have met, and I know Natalie did a great presentation today showing you all the buildings, but I think we've met and or exceeded what we hope your expectations would be for the architecture and style of these buildings. So the plan, again, I believe is in conformance with your comprehensive plan. It's in conformance with your vision for town center, and it's in conformance with the 2018 amendment to the town center planning study. Natalie touched on this, but again, I think part of the 2018 town center planning study, one of the key takeaways was by our recognition that that couldn't all be mostly retail into the future, but by building additional multifamily approaches to housing, we're able to support the balance of the retail that we retain. And we know that as if you give us permission to build these homes, that will further increase the market opportunity for us to be able to complete the retail frontage that we have retained on Route 52. I know all of you are very either long-term familiar or generally familiar with Kipling development. And again, I just want to, again, comment that Kipling has always applied a great and a high standard of detail to what they've developed, both in terms of the buildings, landscaping, and I think we're not only going to do that here, but I think we're going to blow everyone's socks off with what this is going to look like. I won't reiterate all of the details Natalie went through in terms of unit counts and parking. Happy to answer questions on any of those if you have them. But do want to point out just a few other items of details relative to the various types of homes. I think this was all talked at during the Planning and Zoning Commission public hearing, but I know it was on everyone's mind, so I'll just bring it back up again and talk again about some of the rent points, rent ranges, and home values that we anticipate, so that you're clear and aware of what those are. The rental home buildings that are in the orange color, again, those are either 12 or 16 unit buildings. Their rents will range from $1,850 to $2,300 per unit, again, depending on the size and the location within the development. The second and third floor rental units that are above the mixed use buildings will range between $1,500 or $1,600 up to $2,000 per unit. And then the for sale properties, the 8-unit townhome buildings that we'll be building along the lake, we expect that the average sale price on there will be around $325,000. To put that in context, because I know when we talk about rental homes, that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, but with an average rent around $2,000 for the units that we will have here, that's essentially the equivalent of what your housing related costs would be if you bought a $300,000 to $325,000 house. So it's a high price of entry to be a resident of this development. The management will be done by Kipling. They have a very strict management policy regarding the rental process. We'll go into a little bit more detail down the road, but just want to highlight a few things for you. They will do criminal background checks and credit checks. We talked again at the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting and presented this. They have strict rules on balcony usage, on window treatments to maintain good control. They require residents to register their pets with photos, so we'll know each and every pet that's present there and able to account for their behaviors if they misbehave. All residents' vehicles, license plate numbers are stored, and they're all given parking stickers. And again, these are just ways of making sure we know who's there and who's supposed to be there. And if somebody isn't, we're able to identify that. The company does 6-month inspections of all units within the development. Again, that's just to get a sense of each tenant if they're taking care of their space. But while they're in there, they'll also change filters and update smoke detector batteries every time. So they're very, very proactive in how they manage these properties. I think it's important to talk just a little bit about rental homes in general in terms of market trends. I know that was a common question or a common comment that came up during the Planning and Zoning Commission public testimony. There is been a huge shift and exacerbated or accelerated by the pandemic in lifestyle housing choices. And a much larger percentage of the population now is seeking not to be in owner-occupied housing, to have rental housing options, but to find those housing options with the level of amenity that they expect, and again, I would expect to get to at these rent points. Like I said, that's just been exacerbated by the pandemic. We talked a bit about the design thinking and who our residents are going to be, from empty nesters to few couples with children to working professionals, and these are the experiences we've had in the other developments that we have created in the area. That has been the trends. Within the units, we talked again a bit, Natalie went through square footages. Again, all of the units in the rental home buildings will have balconies or patios. All of them have in-unit washers and dryers. Natalie pointed out there are no common corridors or common entry points. Every unit has its own private access point. All units are going to have granite countertops, cultured marble tops in the bathrooms, plank flooring, all stainless steel appliances. So again, all high-end finishes as we view and rent these at a price point so that they are luxury rentals. All concrete driveways for the townhomes. Natalie went through the exhibits that showed the pathways and talked about the right-of-ways. Again, the Town Center Boulevard and Del Webb Boulevard extensions will be public, built to standards agreed to with Public Works and the village engineering consultant. The rest of the roads, driveways, and parking areas will be private and maintained by management and the association. We will have a townhome association for the lakefront townhomes that will have a separate HOA and fee for that maintenance. We talked through, again, I want to reiterate the comment Natalie had made on the bike path, because I think it's important. We've had so many years of having that beautiful bridge we built at River in 52, the path basically ending behind People's First Bank, and this is the missing link. You know, what we all envisioned in the comprehensive plan, what was envisioned in Town Center 1 and Town Center 2, and then the 2018 study of having this mixed use community that really is the center and heartbeat of our town. We have parts of it, right? We know we have residents visiting for the great programming and events we have here all of the time. We just don't have that connectivity. You know, I think, but for the recession, but for the change in retail and e-commerce, and but for the shift in housing, maybe what we had thought about 15 years ago could have gotten done. But the reality is that that plan's not viable today, and we believe that this is a great plan that meets your design expectations, solves a number of problems, will increase your retail, create these pedestrian multi-purpose path loops, and provide a modern housing option and lifestyle option that's really not available in the community at this point. So with that, I will close on my comments and be available for any questions you may have. And I want to just briefly introduce Dave Smith. Dave Smith is an attorney that is representing Kipling, and he's an expert in real estate, but he's going to speak to you tonight about some of the laws and regulations related to tenants, leasing, and housing regulations. So I'll turn it over to Dave.
After the last meeting, it was pointed out that our projector washes out the colors a little bit. So, Mr. Hamer, right in front of you, there is some images. If anybody wants to see a color photo of what the buildings are going to look like, there are some images there. Forgot about those. Sorry about that.
Well, good evening, everyone. Again, thank you to the board for your consideration. You know, Ed asked me to be here tonight primarily to clear the air about a few things that were brought up at the last public meeting. In particular, it's my understanding that there were some concerns expressed about a new law that passed recently, that the understanding out there is that landlords now have to accept people with housing vouchers. One thing that I wanted to make sure everybody is aware of is that that law is the Homelessness Prevention Act. It was passed in May of this year. And that law does not require a landlord to accept people with housing vouchers. What it says is that a landlord cannot discriminate against someone solely because they have a housing voucher or Social Security or things of that nature. What the law does not do is it does not stop a landlord from engaging in the vetting practices that Mr. Tonelli had referenced, meaning that the landlord under this law can still vet people based on their credit scores, debt-to-income ratios, criminal background checks, and there's nothing in this law that stops a landlord from doing that. I can tell you that I've worked with Mr. Maddox and Kipling, who's going to be managing this for some time now. I represent a lot of landlords and people who manage residential properties. Their standards are the top of the top in Will County. Typically, they will require a credit score of 700. They will do very, very detailed background checks on people. And again, nothing about this new law stops them from doing that. The only thing that this law requires is that when somebody does apply for a rental unit, the value of their voucher has to be credited toward the rent for purposes of their income calculation. Now, what I mean by that is Kipling typically will have a policy that anybody who applies for rent has to make triple the monthly rent. So as we heard earlier, the average rental price of these properties is going to be approximately $2,000. Under Kipling's typical rule, that individual would have to show that they have $6,000 per month in verifiable income. What this law requires is that if somebody comes in with a voucher for $1,000 a month, they would then be required to subtract that from the rent, multiply it by 3, and if that person can show that they make, in this particular circumstance, $3,000 a month, then they can rent. But again, nothing about this law simply requires blanketly for them to accept people with vouchers. The other thing to remember, too, is that what is covered by this law, and vouchers more particularly, are a lot of different kinds of people. That includes veterans, it includes disabled people, it includes elderly people. And, you know, as we heard the economic developer talking about, many of these properties are geared towards elderly people and people who may be living in that kind of a situation. But again, it is very, very important for everyone to understand that nothing about this new law coming out stops Kipling in any way from policing and enforcing their very stringent rental requirements. And I wanted to make sure that everybody knows that tonight. And Kipling will be imposing those requirements very, very stringently for anyone who's going to be applying for renting these rental properties. But with that, I will turn it over.
Thank you. With that, before we move into the public comment section, I want to defer over to the clerk. She has received some correspondences, which we will read into the record. Lana, go ahead, please. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Petra Hallerbach. It occurred to me while the board was asking questions of the builder that the builder kept saying he could not sell condominiums in this market. But the townhomes, which are in reality only townhouse style units, are in fact condominiums that he intends to sell. A townhome or a townhouse is a 2 or 3 story dwelling, all belonging to one resident. A condominium is a 1-floor dwelling with another dwelling above it, which is exactly what these townhouse style units are. So I say again, if he is able to sell the townhouse style condominiums, why is he not able to sell 144 condominiums? They, in parentheses, the builder, were deceptive, and the board should have caught this. They, the builder, were lying to us. I am insulted as a resident. In addition, no elderly person will ever be interested in a second-floor townhouse-style unit, or in this case, a condominium. We do not buy properties on second floors that require us to use stairs. We move out of them and find first-floor, 1-floor buildings. Old people like me hate 2 words, nursing homes and stairs. Respectfully, Petra Hallerbach. This is addressed to Mayor and Village Board. I am firmly in favor of the apartment and rental property development. If Shorewood is to grow and attract more restaurants and businesses, a larger and denser population is needed. Rental properties are in high demand, and Shorewood would do well to take advantage of that. I attended the Planning and Zoning meeting about this development last week and was troubled with some of the issues residents raised with this project. There were concerns about increased traffic, more kids in the schools, and a strain on the police and fire departments. Any residential growth we experience in our village will come with those issues, regardless of the project. I built a house here 3 years ago because I saw a community with exciting opportunities to grow. If this rental development gets voted down, combined with the concerns I heard about growth of any kind, I will begin to wonder if I made the right choice about where to build. I hope tonight you can prove to myself and others who are ready for progress, that we are living in the right place with the right people at the helm. Respectfully, Mark Saratori. I am not against the proposed development. I am opposed to the residential that backs up to Jefferson Street. 1, that area was zoned B3. 2, Route 59 is already full. 3, there is only so much property left currently in the village limits that is adjacent to a U.S. highway, specifically Route 52, left to develop. There is residential and detention ponds now that are on 52. Businesses look for visibility and traffic flow, which, as you know, 52 has. Therefore, please reconsider Phase 3 of the project to be for retail that generates sales tax to Shorewood. It is prime retail property for retail in B3 zoning. There is only so much property on a busy state highway left to develop, and it should not be for residential use. Thank you for consideration, Bobby Schwartz. Mayor DeBold, please share this with all members of the board, and please have this read aloud during the citizen portion of tonight's village board meeting. My name is Jeff Levitt, and I live along Peyton Terrace facing the planned mixed-use facilities that are being considered. To keep this brief, I provide the following thoughts in bullet point format. I attended the Planning and Zoning meeting on this topic and felt that the decision was made to approve the variance prior to the public participation. I would caution the board legal counsel tonight not allow any comments or questions relating to the rental rates of the apartments that are planned. I do believe that Illinois state law prohibits the rental rate from being used in consideration of approval of denial of any property planned. Any member of the board should call for a point of order to stop any such discussion. The idea that this should be approved because the rental rates are high is simply a violation. Was the Hamptons of Shorewood required to send certified mail to local residents for the August 3rd meeting? I did not receive my notice until Friday, August 5th. I object to any waiving of second reading on this topic. I believe enough people are interested, and the time to get this right is important. If tonight's board meeting is similar to the P&Z meeting, insufficient space, seating, etc. was provided, and perhaps this meeting should have been moved to an off-site, bigger venue to allow all residents that are interested to participate. Perhaps an online virtual attendance option should also be provided. I encourage my fellow residents to take advantage of the FOIA, Freedom of Information Act, and learn what is really happening here and when. Request emails from board and commission members on this topic. Review any emails from the city to the petitioner. I suspect, like many mixed-use facilities, the business portion will become vacant eyesores, as this design does not put the commercial front on 52, a busy street, but on Windstone, a much slower traffic street. Will signs be allowed on 52 pointing people in, I don't want more commercial signage? At P&Z, this was highlighted as senior apartments, but these are all accessed by stairways without elevators. This is dangerous. There are a lot of questions swirling about this management company and developer. Shorewood can do better. If this moves forward, have the following restrictions. Use a different name other than Del Webb Boulevard. Have the infrastructure and all roads built in Phase 1 or an escrow amount to cover them all before Phase 1 begins. That way, when the builder and the mixed use fails, the city is not left holding the bill. The hundreds of trees currently on this site are responsibly dug up and offered to residents rather than just bulldozed. That a traffic light is added at Windstone or escrow from the builder is held until the state approves it. Would the state approve it if the cost was 100% covered? Why not consider an overhead pedestrian walkway leading to the park and playground to keep our kids safe? Let the builder pay for this in Phase 1 also. I am clearly against this proposal, but if approved or already approved in the minds of many, Get the money from the builder in advance of all contingencies and make it hurt if he decides to walk away. A 3-year plan for 3 phases for such a small development is not advantageous to current Shorewood residents. Thank you, Jeff Levitt. This is an email that was addressed to Natalie. Natalie, hello, I would like to share my opinions on the apartments proposal. I think this is not good for the community. First, I think the developer/builder, Mr. Maddox, is not reliable or a quality developer. In the past, I believe corners have been cut and the result is visible in Kipling Estates. The number of people this could bring to the area is of concern, as schools cannot get past a referendum that would allow for the building of an additional school, and the schools are already past the limit. Please do not allow for this apartment complex to be developed. The community would like to keep Shorewood a nice place to live. Our community would rather see a community development such as a park district than apartments. Thank you for your considerations. Warm regards, Danielle Jodison. This was a letter to Natalie. Dear Ms. Engel, I am and have been a resident of Walnut Trail subdivision for 15 years. I think for future growth, we need more mixed-use housing. I especially like the retail down below. It will help to bring more people to this side of town instead of everyone going to Route 59. I think this is a great step for our community. I also think this will bring the potential for Shorewood to expand westward. I want to express that I am in favor of this, although I couldn't make it to the meeting tonight because it's my birthday. Thank you, Paul Caraco.
Happy birthday.
This is also a letter to Natalie. Dear Ms. Engel, I am unable to make this evening's village board meeting due to a conflict of my schedule. However, I wish to tell you of my experience working with Mr. Edward Maddox and his employees of Kipling Group. As president of Bay Property Services, who manages Timber Oaks Community, Condos, and Townhome Association in Joliet, we have been immersed in a relationship with Kipling Group's ongoing construction to the neighboring communities. Now, with the completion of Timber Oak subdivision, I can say that Kipling Group has been nothing but a gracious construction neighbor. During the process of construction, Kipling Group and Mr. Maddox made it a point to ensure the residents of the community, as well as my company, maintained a very positive working relationship. They did this with timely notifications to my office and the residents of upcoming large projects and other important community items. Their on-site personnel often notified me of small issues with our communities and even went as far as to correct some of the issues at no charge to the associations. Kipling Group was diligent about keeping all the communities clean from construction debris, and when construction was completed, they kept the buildings and area manicured and appealing. To this day, they continue to be a great neighbor. As further testament to the fine relationship developed between the Timber Oaks communities and Kipling Group, I wanted to take this opportunity to share the Village of Shorewood, a letter from the president of our Timber Oaks Condo and Community Board, Cynthia Hamilton, addressed to Joliet about this very subject. See attached, and I will read that next. In closing, I can only express my appreciation for working with a quality organization and professional developer as Mr. Maddox and his staff at Kipling Group. Sincerely, Joel Shoup, President of Bay Property Services.
Lon, if you need a drink, take a drink. You've read a few letters, so.
This is a letter that was addressed to the City of Joliet City Council members, James Caparelli, Joliet City Manager, and James Torrey, Director of Planning. It's dated June 27th, 2022. Dear City Council members and staff, please let me introduce myself. My name is Cynthia Hamilton, Co-President of Timber Oaks Subdivision Homeowners Association. I am writing to you regarding Mr. Ed Maddox and Kipling Group of Shorewood, Illinois. As you may already know, Mr. Maddox has been finishing the development of Timber Oaks subdivision in the city of Joliet. I want to bring to your attention the fact that Mr. Maddox has done a lot for Timber Oak subdivision and its residents, all at no cost to the Homeowners Association and its residents, including cleaning up streets and dumpsters after a construction project has finished, installation of new lighting as well as repair for the existing lighting in the shared park between Timber Oak subdivision and his apartment complex, repair of the retention pond that was clogged and unfortunately had backed up. I also wanted to mention that since Kipling began developing this area, there have been many benefits to our subdivision's homeowners association and its residents, which include making our area a safer place to live. For instance, increasing our property values by threefold. Kipling installed security cameras in every parking lot. Kipling has a routine cleaning of streets. Kipling's stringent qualifying program for their tenants, which include a criminal background check. It has been the experience of the Timber Oaks Homeowners Association that Mr. Maddox has been very professional and courteous neighbor. We greatly appreciate and look forward to continuing this neighborly relationship with Mr. Maddox and his company, Kipling Estates. Sincerely, Cynthia Hamilton, Timber Oaks HOA co-president. And this is addressed to Natalie. Hi, Natalie. I live in STC and sent the following to our community today. I attended last Wednesday and will not be attending Tuesday. I received more support than not to this post. Since Wednesday, I've been processing the information given at the meeting and reading all of the posts in our STC community, as well as the talk of the town Shorewood group. I think it's important we remember that we all knew when we moved to STC that this property would eventually be developed. One of the things that attracted us to STC was the idea that STC was originally built on the Mayberry concept. We loved the small town feel that comes with being an STC. Living by the village hall and all of the fun events and activities that happen in our own backyard is something we do not take for granted. I do believe that the village listens to everyone in Shorewood and cares about doing the best thing to help our village grow while trying to keep our small town community feel that extends beyond STC. If they didn't, we'd have a massive apartment complex across the street by now. We'd also have apartment complexes on our side of Route 52. I was told last night that the village has been approached by multiple developers that are interested in building apartment complexes in the area that is being decided on this coming Tuesday. They have all been given a hard no. And I can't speak for anyone, but I certainly am happy we don't have a Kohl's shopping center over there. That would completely change the feel of our community. STC is the third community I've lived in Shorewood. I moved to Shorewood in 2011 when I got divorced. I was a single mom with 2 young boys. I previously lived off Ridge Road, and they were already in Minooka School District. I wanted to keep them in Minooka schools, so I ended up in the townhomes in Walnut Trails. I was a renter, and that's all capitalized, for the first time in my life. I was in a situation where I needed to rent for a couple of years to save a down payment to purchase. I left my rental unit in better condition than what it was when I moved there. After a couple of years, I was able to purchase a townhouse I purchased in Kipling Estates. Then I got remarried, and Eric and I priced out a Ryan home in STC. When we were at the sales office, we were told that the front of STC will eventually have small shops and a library. We knew we wanted to move to this community largely because of the whole Mayberry small town, small business future. We decided we'd wait and save some more money and then build in a year. But then I got pregnant with Maya and had to move. We lucked out and didn't have to build and were able to purchase an original STC home on Peyton Terrace. We absolutely love our home and our community, and due to this, we want what's best for it. There are so many people with serious and valid concerns regarding the proposed development. When I weigh the pros and cons, to me, I see more pros. While I'm also concerned about the risk of riffraff with rentals, I do know our community will not tolerate it. Do you know what there are a number of, did you know there are a number of people renting in Walnut Trails and Kipling Estates in the townhomes? While I can't prove it, I'm almost certain some are Section 8. So what we are concerned about is already here. There are also renters in houses and duplexes throughout Shorewood. This is something that is not avoidable. The positive about the rental units is they can eventually be sold as condos. I'm thinking Kipling will not want to manage rentals forever and will eventually like to get away and move that area to an association, which I'm pretty sure would require that the units are sold. I could be wrong, but I just don't see them staying rentals forever. The traffic concerns are valid, but IDOT will not put a light in without growth over here. I can see why. I'm a runner. I've crossed 52 countless times. The only time there was a slight wait is during peak times during the day. I walked to Crossroads Fest Friday night at 7 p.m. and was able to stand in the middle of 52 for over a solid minute without a car coming. So I see why it doesn't warrant a light yet. I'm confident we will get a light if they build the Hamptons, though. They'll also fix traffic issues. Shorewood isn't a village that doesn't fix issues.
Point of order. Point of order, please. Could we put that the written statements are on record, and let's go on to the public statement? Sir, we're going to continue finishing reading the statements. At this point,
It's a diary.
doesn't matter. It's been available to any. So stop. Anybody in the public has been afforded the opportunity to send an email to Ms. Engel, and it was noted. It would be read.
But this is getting to the point of ridiculous.
It doesn't matter, sir.
I would swear myself out, but I just want to make a point where we agree to put it on the record, and let's go on. Thank you.
Go ahead and continue.
Something to also consider if you've ever been to Naperville Trader Joe's, guess what surrounds it? Apartment complexes that look nowhere near as nice as what is being proposed here. I can only speak for myself, but I love Trader Joe's in Shorewood, and the smaller area that will be left for a business like this in front of the rental areas on 59 would be perfect to rally for one. Again, giving us a small town community feel store. This house supports small businesses. We want small businesses we can walk to. We walk to Mauve and WCB. That entire complex of businesses are thriving. Why wouldn't we want an extension of that over here? Plainfield is watching us. We know a number of small business owners that want to extend to Shorewood, but Shorewood has historically not given an area that fits their business. This mixed-use area fits it, and they want it. We support this. I'm genuinely worried that if we don't move forward with this, we will miss the opportunity to have high-end housing and small businesses in that area. If we shut this down, why would any other builders want the headache of trying to get into this area? When I saw the plans, I was shocked at how nice it is. The difference between Shorewood at Route 52/59 is what is proposed down this way is drastically different. As my husband points out, we live 2 miles from a trailer park, Burger King, and 7-Eleven. This proposal is nothing like that. But if this doesn't pass, I'm scared of what the future looks like over here. I know this is an unpopular opinion in this community, but it's about more than just us in STC. It's about Shorewood as a whole and our future. And this was submitted by Julie Cattrall, and that's all I have.
And real quick, so everybody's aware, STC is referring to Shorewood Town Center. So I did see some looks, so at least everybody's aware, STC is referring to Shorewood Town Center, which is a development right back here with all of us. So was that all of them then,
Yes,
Lana?
it is.
We've got one more over here.
But you do have one more? Okay.
This is from Bridget Burke. Hello. My husband Jim and I live in Shorewood Town Center. We have lived here since 2014. We originally bought here as we loved the small town feel of the community. We have several concerns with the development. The first is the traffic concern at the end of the subdivision. I personally know of a few people who have been accidents at that intersection. With the increase in traffic, what is the plan? Second, what is the financial benefit to the village and the schools? I've asked the question on multiple platforms and have gotten varied answers. One of the answers was $30,000 in tax revenue. That covers 1/3 of a police officer's salary, With the population increase, there will be more than one needed. How will this affect the schools? The schools are already overcrowded. What guarantees are in place with the downturn in the economy that this development will be fully financed and completed to plan? There have been past troubles with Kipling LLC, which are found on several news outlets. I'm adamantly opposed to the development along with my household. Regards, Bridget Burke.
All right, thank you. All right, what we'll do, we can start on some of the public comment. We'll move into that. We can get through a few, but so everybody's aware, our recording capabilities are limited to about a 2-hour span. We will have to take a pause in a few, but I'd rather at least try to keep everybody moving. So with that, we'll call the first person up. We'll start with the public comment section. Somebody by the name of Bill Ryan. If you could spell your name for the record, sir, and then I'll read an oath.
Hi, last name's Ryan, R-Y-A-N.
All right, do you solemnly swear that the testimony you are about to give will be the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Go ahead.
The only reason I'm here is because today's not my birthday, so. Can I direct a question to the person I'm asking, or do I just say what was on my mind?
You can just go ahead and speak, sir.
Okay, Natalie, I remember you were doing all those things up there about Del Webb Street coming across Route 52. I'm sorry about that. The last time at the planning and zoning meeting, there was a gentleman that was talking about traffic that would be coming out of the new development going south on Del Webb, and then he would try to make a left turn. In the meantime, people would be coming west on 52, making a left turn into a Del Webb community. And I didn't know, I was trying to follow what you were saying there. Were you addressing that potential problem? Because that seemed like it could be a tough one.
Should I respond or should we wait?
You can respond.
Oh, sure. So it's really, the way it's going to work is similar to other four-way intersections. It's almost going to be exactly like what we see at the intersection of Whinstone and Jefferson today, where people will be able to do a left turn from Jefferson into Shorewood Glen, or they'll be able to do a left turn coming eastbound on Jefferson into the Hamptons. Like we see at Whinstone, there may be times where people have to pause before making the turn to make sure that it's clear, but in both directions, there will be a dedicated turn lane to turn left. So those are shown in red. So essentially, there's a turn lane and stacking for a few cars. So if there's a car coming in the other direction, it's possible somebody may have to pause or stop for a little bit before they make their turn.
All right. Is there any long-term solution to this? Like, would there be a traffic light at Whinstone at some point and also down there, or does that make any sense? Or?
So we think the traffic light will be at Whinstone. At some point, could there be an interconnected traffic light at Del Webb? Maybe, but right now the plan is to try to get as much traffic as possible to Whinstone, because Whinstone really connects more. So it goes north to the town center, it will ultimately go to Black Road, and then it goes south to Sile. So it really is more of a collector road than Del Webb. And the good thing is, I'm more of a pokey driver. I tend to go for the easiest route. So if I lived in Shorewood Glen, I think I would come out the south end and go north on Whinstone to be able to turn right at a light. And we think that, that's a good option for people as well.
Okay. I had about 10 questions, but the presentation was so good, you answered most of them. So
that's good.
I have just one more. For the real estate attorney, you're talking about that law about the criminals, the sex offenders, and things like this. And I got the impression that it really wasn't going to apply here. I'm just wondering, what was the overall purpose of the law to begin with?
So what I can tell you is that really, and this is my opinion from reading the statute, but the main goal is to make sure that landlords don't discriminate against people solely because they have housing vouchers. So the law states that there are many landlords out there currently that will say, look, if you've got a housing voucher, we're not going to take you. The law provides that you cannot refuse to rent to somebody solely for that reason. But again, as I mentioned earlier, the law does still provide that and doesn't restrict a landlord from applying any other number of criteria that they have, again, whether it's credit score, background check, all of these other things can still be applied. And quite frankly, my personal opinion is that the law was enacted to ensure that people aren't denied housing simply because they have housing vouchers, quite frankly.
So you think it's all about vouchers? The gentleman at the planning and zoning meeting, when he was reading it, he was talking about sex offenders, criminals, and things like this. And words like that just, I think, scare the hell out of people, you know? And I'm just wondering what you're saying is if someone just got out of prison, he's a sex offender, you can't deny him residency just because of that.
So your question is,
Can you deny someone just on that single thing? Someone's a criminal, sex offender, whatever else. Is that reason enough to say, hey, I can't rent to you?
yes, it is. And there is another provision of the same law that the Homelessness Prevention Act addressed, which specifically says that what is not proper is you cannot refuse to rent to somebody for an arrest that doesn't lead to a conviction, a juvenile record, or a criminal history which has been expunged, sealed, or impounded. So if somebody has an arrest record, that's not enough. If somebody has a juvenile record, obviously you can't use that. And if the crime at issue, the record has been expunged, you can't deny somebody housing based on that. Excuse me, other than those things, a landlord can consider somebody's criminal history and make rental decisions based on that criminal history.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think that's the skill to this whole thing, is getting good tenants. And if the law
Mayor, can I
allows
just
that,
make
then
a-
it should.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
Sure.
interrupt you.
Go
Can I
ahead.
just make a comment on that? I mean, it seems like the conversation's going, a lot of times more towards who's going to live in these places rather than the zoning issue. And this is truly a zoning issue and whether a planned unit development is appropriate. We can't control who lives in any building or any home anywhere. It's interesting, and, I understand why the developer brought it up, but our focus really needs to be on the zoning issue. And the lady brought up, the rents of the apartments. Well, that's interesting too, and I know they like to talk about it. I think the only reason it might be relevant for you guys is that it shows you the quality of the home, right? It shows you that it's meeting the PUD standards. But I don't want us to get off on a tangent where we're making a decision based upon who may or may not live there. Let's try to focus on the zoning when you make your decision.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think the only reason we were bringing this up, and you hear this a lot, is because as citizens here, we want to feel positive about
No,
this.
no,
and I think that just helps to understand how this works. That's all.
I understand completely your point and your concern.
Okay. Well, thanks for your attention. And when this is done with and over with, no matter how it goes, I just hope we as the citizens can feel positive about how it turns out. And I hope we can get some input from, some of the trustees to that effect. Thank you.
Thank you. Frank Flory. Can you spell your name, sir?
Flory?
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you are about to give will be the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Yes, the first week of July, I put a complaint against the gun range over on Frontage Road. The reason I put the complaint against them, the grass over there on the left-hand side is about 2 feet tall.
Let me interrupt for a minute. Is that in regards to this project? Is that where you're going?
No.
Are you looking
Shorewood.
to address the village board to kind of as a general comment about another development?
It's on the Frontage Road over in Shorewood over here.
Okay, so your concern is on the property
Right.
by the gun range over there?
Right.
All right. I'm going to ask that you wait, we bring that up when we get into the citizens under the regular board meeting. We're trying to steer all comments right now pertaining to this development.
Okay.
I just don't want to muddy up the conversation right now, sir. Chris Dre.
Thank you, Mayor. A lot of my questions or comments were answered, I think, at the Planning and Zoning meeting and also tonight. I do think it's a hard conversation and a hard decision that you all have to make in front of you. I've made comments that the development looks like a good development for the community. One of the things that I was concerned about, and I don't know if this is directed towards the mayor or staff, what happens if you were to say no? How does that affect development in this community? It's been very quiet for years. I spent many a time on staff and saw many things pass opportunity-wise. So what happens if you say no?
Are you looking for an answer or are you looking for speculation?
Kind of a hypothetical
I mean-
question, Mr. Turner.
Wait, I'll take that. Oh, here, let me answer. Let me see if I can just kind of give you a brief overview because I don't want, again, sure, this property's been vacant for 17 years. As some of the presentations discussed, there was always the concept of retail development. It's been touched on by a variety of presentations, from development to how the economy has changed, housing demands have changed, and whatnot. But again, this property's been here for 17 years. It has been mentioned, there have been different developments that have tried approaching us that are large-scale rentals, and the village has pushed back. So if we say no, that's this board's choosing. The next developer, I don't know when that may be, could come along. If the board so chooses to agree with this project, there may be an opportunity to see some responsible growth that everybody has expressed interest in trying to see restaurants. The petitioners already acknowledged they have a restaurant, they have a pizzeria, they have an Italian market. So there's possibilities, there's options, but it's this board's opportunity to take this all in and evaluate it. So I don't necessarily know that answers your question 100%.
No, I appreciate
But-
the comments for sure. I think as a 24-year resident, seeing the growth that has happened and see us stall and then drive through other communities in the last several years, seeing them grow and wonder why don't we have that? We have so much open space and availability, a very active staff, mayor, manager, that I think that there's potential here. And I don't think that you would bring something forward staff-wise to the board, the planning and zoning, unless it really met a lot of requirements. So I do give you all credit for that. We have a lot of, as a community, a lot of things going on. Right now, I just saw on your agenda $1.8 million for the Public Works facility. I see the police department that's over, has not enough capacity for the staff they have. And to say that we're going to continue to do that without any growth is just irresponsible. So I hope that you consider this project and move that forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Tom Schweitzer? And if the control room can remind me when I'm about 5 minutes from when you need to cut off, please. Go ahead, sir. Thank you. Or I'm sorry. Can you spell your name for the record?
Thomas, Thomas, Schweitzer, Schweitzer.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you are about to give will be the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, when you came to Shorewood Glen, you promised us that there would not be rental units built in Shorewood.
I never said that. You can look at any record that was presented that was never said. Look at any video, sir.
Okay? And I'd like to know how your additional police and fire, you're going to need more policemen, more firemen, more equipment. How are they going to be paid for?
It's all through taxing, sir. The village operates off a sales tax component. So again, if this project is supported, you'd start to generate additional revenues. Our police force is very well staffed. We recently just added another officer here in the spring, but nobody's overburdened right now in regards to police and fire applications. If you do have a successful development in that capacity, you start to generate additional sales taxes, you create additional property taxes, and those are all different funding components that are added into the equation. There's not much different. And the same thing, if we move into a development per se that was all residential, you still run the same risk. You still run the risk of police matters, fire, EMS matters. Those all still exist.
I understand that. Residential is different than rental. That's all I have to say.
No problem, thank you. Jim Lynch.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the board. Before the whole meeting started, I left you all a package of stuff. That was my 6-minute speech, which I compressed to meet the 3-minute limit shown on the agenda. That was predicated on information that we had from the meeting last week. This changes some of that. I expressed then that I was very much opposed to the way things were set up then, some of the questions I had. I've not changed my mind yet. I still want to understand what's in here, and I'm hoping that the changes that have been put forth here tonight are going to be in a revised PUD so we can study them. One particular thing is this traffic intersection at Delwebb Boulevard. That was poorly described in the previous document, and I think we really need to see some clear explanation of that. I understand the cross-reference to other intersections, but we need to see what ours is going to look like. Let me see, there was something else here. Because my whole plan kind of got blown out the window there as I try to think about how I want to deal with this. There's one thing about the schools, the map that was showing up here where they had a Troy and Minooka districts, butting up against each other. When I looked at the process based on the old information, I looked at the Troy district and the Minooka district, and they overlap by about 100 yards. Now, has something been done in discussion with those districts to make it a single line? And I still think having both districts in this relatively small subdivision, it's not going to be a really homogeneous environment for the kids that are in there. And so I question whether or not that's the way it ought to be. So given that, I'm going to stop now. I know the clock's going to run on me pretty quick anyway because of your video issue. But I still think we need to have some more specifics that we can analyze and not just work off whatever we hear here in this meeting. That seem okay?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. We'll try to do one more. Is there a Nora Grunberg?
Good evening, everyone.
And can you also spell your name for the record, please?
You bet. Gruenberg.
You solemnly swear the testimony you are about to give will be the truth.
I do.
Thank you. Go ahead.
So as I believe all of you probably know, Will County is the fastest growing county in the state. And people want to move to Shorewood because it's awesome. But just like the rest of the nation and the rest of the state, here in Will County and in Shorewood, we have a terrible housing shortage. We're right in the middle of a period of humongous economic growth. It's a boom. We have that new development coming up on I-80 and I-55, which is going to drive more jobs, lots more visitors, a lot more interest in the area, but we have a housing inventory bust. So, with that, the data is just not encouraging. We have the lowest rates of available inventory in recent history and the highest prices. This is a crisis, and it's not the Illinois Realtors' business to recommend projects. We recommend and support policies that encourage growth and development of housing inventory, which we so desperately need. So what we're seeing across the state and here in Will County is a real demand for this type of housing, multi-use, multi-purpose. This really is the future. So it's encouraging to see Shorewood considering this kind of development because it really is what the public is demanding. And when you look at some of the larger developments going up in Will County in Bolingbrook, Plainfield, Romeoville, Lockport, New Lenox, these are beautiful, apartment and, multifamily units, but none of them are like this that offer the multi-use. So this is something that the public really wants and needs, and here in the second fastest growing county in the state, we need it. So we definitely encourage you to strongly consider developments like this that will encourage housing stock and, bring more people to the area. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Let's try to get one more. Can we do Connie Olson, please? Same thing, ma'am. Can you please spell your last name for the record?
Olson.
Thank you. And do you solemnly swear the testimony you are about to give will be the truth?
Yes.
Thank you.
I have a question. First of all, thank you for being here tonight and everyone. I have a question. You said that the individual luxury homes have identification numbers with the county. Do the garages also have individual identification numbers? I have a reason for my question.
No.
Okay. I want to say that in the 70s and 80s and in the 90s in the southern suburbs of Chicago, a lot of housing condo units were built, turned into rentals, and then sold again as condos when everything became great again. And the thing is, and here is my second question for you, are you in this for the long run, or are you planning? Because as Natalie said, these are set up as condos. Furnaces, water meters, everything. It screams condominiums. Is this an income stream for you now until you finish the homes, and then you're going to get out of the development and sell them as condos? Because there's a big difference in luxury rentals and then in 5 years or 4 years selling as condos. Leaving those people buying in there, they won't have your expertise as a condo development. You'll be gone. And in the 80s and the 70s and the 90s, we saw communities in the southern suburbs, they weren't kept up nicely because the people couldn't do it. So are you in it for the long run, or are they going to be sold as condos? That's why I wanted to know about the garages, because Sandpiper South and Crestwood had garages, and they had the individual numbers. And there weren't enough garages for the condos, and you don't have enough garages for the apartments. Are you in it for the long run?
Yes. There's no plan to sell the units.
Swear? Thank you.
All right, no problem. Thank you. So with that right now, we're gonna take about a 15-minute break because our audio video folks have, since this is being recorded and broadcast through our local television network, we do need to give about a 15-minute break so they can shut that down, reboot their CD mechanism, and we'll start right back up. We're going to give it about 10 minutes or so, and then Matt Persichetti will be the next speaker. We'll kick right back in. So at this point, we'll just call a recess at this point. All right, thank you everybody for giving us that few minutes to get the TV side of things. For the record, all of the board members are back into spots at the dais. We will continue on. Matt Persichetti. Can you please spell your name for the record, please?
Yes, Persicketi.
Do you solemnly swear the testimony you are about to give will be the truth?
It is.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Matt Persichetti. My wife and 4 kids have been in Shorewood residence for the past 15 years, and I'm sorry for those of you that heard this Wednesday, but they didn't. I'm a realtor. I stay on top of the housing supply and trends and the demand statistics in our industry, and some of this will be a little bit repetitive of what Nora, but I'm going to expound on it a little bit. The National Association of Realtors uses the term crisis. We have a housing shortage crisis in this country, not just in Shorewood. It's a historic 50-year record shortage of affordable homes available for purchase or rent. A recent study estimates that the United States has an underdeveloped underbuilding gap of 5.5 million housing units over the past 20 years. A lot of that is because people don't want things in their backyard. I wholeheartedly support this proposed project. It's a perfect, up-to-date project that we sorely need. The benefits will far outweigh the negative impact that it can have. The demand for this type of housing is through the roof. Shorewood, I'm sorry to say it, we're old. The median age of Shorewood is 41.2 to To use a comparison, just because it's our neighbor to the north and similar size, the median age of Plainfield is 34.8. Our population is getting older, and that means that millennials, who are now the largest group of home buyers, either aren't buying in Shorewood, don't want to buy in Shorewood, or they're not buying in Shorewood, and it's either because they can't afford it or they don't want to live here. This project is the exact type of housing that's attractive to millennials. It may even house some of our adult children's. We want more amenities, right? Like park districts, restaurants, recreational options. Those only, some people even said put that there instead of that, but those only come with more rooftops. The negative impacts people are saying, statistics will tell you there's very little impact on the schools, fire, or police with this type of project. Water right now in Shorewood is very expensive. I'm paying $150 a month. I don't know what you guys are paying for your water and your refuse. We're going to tap into Lake Michigan, hopefully sooner than later, and it's going to be a lot more money. So how do we pay for that? We pay for that. For us to have a lower water bill, we need more rooftops in order for that to happen. I've heard some things about the Kipling Group. Kipling Group has developed Lake Forest, Hunt Club, Kipling Estates, Fox Bend, the Town Center, Westminster, Shorewood Glen, all developed by the Kipling Group. I think most of us live there, and we all like where we live. I think he does a damn good job as a developer. Adding this type of housing is actually, statistically, says it's going to raise your property values for those that are afraid that it's going to lower your property values. I'll give you an example. The median home price in Shorewood right now is $358,980. That's $7,660 higher than the median price in Plainfield. In the past 12 months, the median change in value of a Shorewood property was 14.8% higher. Yay. In Plainfield, 17.7%. So Plainfield, by having a more balanced housing mix, they gained an additional 3% of value on their homes compared to ours. If you approve this, I will welcome my new village mates with open arms, and I hope that you do approve it. Thank you.
Thank you. Justin, is it McLaughlin? Same thing, when you hit the podium, please, sir. Can you spell your name for the record?
McLaughlin.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you are about to give will be the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. Go ahead.
So I do as an Illinois real estate agent myself, I go to a lot of these meetings, and I don't know if there's a handbook for what the public says when they go to these meetings, but you always hear, hey, Mr. Maddox, beautiful development, but just not here, right? There's 100 reasons why they may be saying that. That's for the board to interpret, not for me to interpret. But the reason I bring that up is because this morning I looked up Naperville, and I wish I would have gotten numbers, right? But I looked up Naperville apartments, and there's Naperville Gardens. There's all these, right? There's hundreds and, well, I don't want to say hundreds. There's a lot of apartments in Naperville, okay? And since 2015, Naperville has been ranked one of the safest cities, top 10 safest cities in the country since 2015. A lot of those years being number one. So the reason I bring that up is just for the concerns of citizens who may think that apartments bring more crime. That's not the case. Let me get to my notes. So, as Matt mentioned earlier, Mr. Maddox has developed most of the most iconic neighborhoods in Shorewood. He's a resident of Shorewood. He truly believes in the growth, and putting a development like this is absolutely going to give Shorewood the growth that it desperately needs. Let me just get this a little closer. I think my eyesight's going bad. So one of the things that got brought up in the Land and Use Committee, the word a lot you heard was recession. And
let's keep it focused on this project.
It is on the project. But one of the things I wanted to point out was that they asked, Mr. Maddox what he would do if there was a recession. And the common misconception because of 2008 is that a recession automatically brings a housing bubble, and that is not the case. 4 of the last 6 recessions that we have had, housing actually grew 3.5% in price to about, I think in 2001, it grew to almost 7%, okay? So a recession does not mean, and by definition, right now, we are in a recession. And so one of the things that really pains me to say this as a realtor is there is a lot of people who do not believe in buying a home. They don't think that is the highest and best use of their disposable income, and they would rather invest that in something instead of maybe growing 3 to 5% on a home and also paying that interest every year. They believe in investing that in something in 10 to 20%. So there is a very, very high demand for people who don't want to ever purchase a home because they want to use that disposable income other places. So I, again, like Matt and most of my colleagues, I do wholeheartedly back this and really look forward to hearing what the board has to say about it. So, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Jim Blackburn? Also, please spell your last name for the record.
Sure. Blackburn, B-L-A-C-K-B-U-R-N.
You solemnly swear that the testimony you are about to give will be the truth.
Yes.
Thank you.
First of all, I'm opposed to this whole apartment deal. I've been living here for 40 years and I've seen a lot come and go. And I'm a former school board member of Minooka 201. I'm also an election judge. I've seen so much that goes on here. Number one is that we can't pass a referendum. We cannot. It's impossible right now. Still we want to put more homes in here? Are we crazy? I've watched these referendums come and go, and we've had two blockers. Number one, Del Webb. They'll vote 80% of the people against. Number two, a big hunk of Minooka will vote against it unless they build it down in Minooka. When I ran on the board in the 90s, we had to fight to get one school here, right here in Walnut Trails. And it took 4 years of me fighting with them to get it here because they wanted it down there. If we keep on bringing bodies on here, we're going to have kids shipped down to Minooka every day. My 3 kids back in the 80s and 90s had to bus down to Minooka. And I swore then it's not going to happen again. And now my grandkids are. And it's before 7 in the morning, my 10-year-old granddaughter is being bused down to Minooka because we have not addressed the real issue here. Growth's great, but we need smart growth. And if we can't pass referendums for our kids, what the hell are we doing? What the hell are we doing? It makes no sense. Next, I've also heard private road. I cringe when I hear that private road word. When this, not you folks necessarily, but when this board voted for Del Webb to go in there, we have no east-west corridors besides Scioto, Black Road, and Jefferson Street here. How the hell do you get east and west in this town when you grow further west? It isn't going to happen. And we want another private road right here? That makes no sense to me. Cut the private roads out, people, because we're going to have a bottleneck in here you won't believe. It makes no sense to have private roads. Del Webb should have gone south of here, somewhere not in the middle of town, but what's done is done. But the thing is, things you folks do here impacts everybody. And you may not see it when you first vote on it, but down the road, you see what happens now with our east-west corridors. You see what happens with our schools. It's sad. It's really sad. But we should not be busing our kids down to Minooka when we have all the land here possible. Minooka Schools owns 140 acres right here in Shorewood for a high school and a junior high, but they're not putting nothing there because they have a block of people that don't want a school built up here. And it makes it doubly worse when you have another group up here doing the same thing, voting against all our referendums. So until we get this straightened out, we are crazy to be doing what we're doing here. I love the look of that whole development, but not multiple family dwellings. We can't be bringing in multiple kids in a school district that's overcrowded already. My understanding is that junior high and intermediate school are packed to the gills. So what are we doing? You know, it just doesn't make any sense. Everything you do here is just adding to compounding the problem. Thank you.
Nope, thank you. Mr. Bob Daw. Can you spell your last name for the record, sir?
D-A-W-E.
Thank you. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you are about to give will be the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Beautiful keynote, thank you. So that took out about 3 or 4 of my questions. So the main question, I guess, is what is the benefit to the current residents of Shorewood of this development? And I'm not expecting an answer. It's rhetorical.
I'll gladly answer.
Oh.
What is the benefit? It creates opportunity for different businesses and growth within the community. We hear on a regular basis that residents are seeking shopping, dining, retail opportunities that they don't want to drive into Plainfield, Naperville, Joliet, and other places to do that. Without looking forward as to where's the village going to grow, the village is going to grow west. As also has been mentioned, we've had 3 big national builders that want to build entire rental subdivisions, homes. They want to build rental homes. We've said no. We've had apartment complex builders coming, wanting to build 1,000 units at a time. We've said no. This is a balance to that project. But finding an opportunity to find stuff that's also available for residences, for young professionals, for seniors, for those that just don't want to buy a home, there's a housing segment we're missing. So where this goes, it does create future growth for our West.
For
if you look
our
at
residents or for people moving in?
Sure, but
No,
but for
both.
existing residences, for our existing resident, you start to bring additional businesses in. That's an entire retail corridor that's been made available on Route 52 for another 4, 5, 6 different restaurants or shopping amenities that can go in there.
I've
So
got enough
we have
cell
to-
phones, so I don't need another cell phone store.
Sir, I mean, you know, we can all speculate what may go there, whether it's a cell phone store versus a restaurant to whatever it may be. You know, we can be optimistic, we can be pessimistic into what our views might be as to what type of development go there. I'm more optimistic in the regards as to what could go.
So most of my concerns were cleared up with the presentation. So my biggest one now is pulling out of Del Webb. If someone's coming from the north and I'm coming out of Del Webb from the south, and we both want to go east, if we get there at identical times, who goes first?
It's no different than the intersection at Winstone Route 52.
I know, it's the same,
no
but
different than the
it's going to be a
intersection at Route-
difficult.
It's no different than any intersection that we have in town right now. Raven Road and Route 52 is the same type of intersection. Route 52 and Winstone Drive would create the same aspect.
Right. At this point, we don't have to make that choice when there's nothing across the street, but it's going to be more difficult.
I understand. Rules of the road are rules of the road, and
Yes.
we all should be aware of those,
And-
just as other drivers on the road. So an intersection is an intersection.
Yeah.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there a James Halstead?
James Halstead.
Sure, go ahead. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you are about to give will be the truth?
I do.
Thank you, sir. Go ahead.
There have been a lot of changes in this past year. We've had changes in the state laws. Now, anybody who owns more than 3 units of rental property is subject to new laws. One of the laws, 775 Illinois Compiled Statutes 5/3, disallows landlords of this many units to discriminate against any applicant or current tenant who has orders of protection against them, has sexual harassment against them, has multiple arrest records against them, multiple convictions against them. I think you're starting to get the picture. When you get huge developments like this of 16 and 12 unit apartment buildings, you're going to have complications under this law. That's already the law. So the landlord, whether they have good intentions or bad, is very restricted now as to what they can do to control the quality of the neighborhood once you introduce something like that. Now, starting in 2023, we have another new law, and that new law says that landlords of 3 or more units must rent to subsidized applicants and tenants if that allows them to pay the rent. So you're not looking at their income, you're looking at their income plus the taxes you paid for them to live there. So this would change the character of Shorewood dramatically if we build these 16-unit and 12-unit apartment buildings in the middle of our peaceful village. Think about that. Do you want our village, which is peaceful and primarily owner-occupied single-family homes, to change to this? I don't think so. Talk to your friends and neighbors and see what they think. Do they want this change? Growth can be good, but if you have the wrong kind of growth, you're gonna regret it. Lots of police calls, lots of headaches, lots of fights at the schools. You're getting the picture?
And are you done, or I'm sorry, I want you to make sure you finish.
Say again?
If you're finished, I was going to respond.
Okay, thank you. Please, please consider what you're doing here. If you introduce 16 and 12-unit apartment buildings in our peaceful village.
Thank you. And I believe the attorney already made reference in regarding some of this. Is there any reference that you want to make to that? I know you've already covered some of that aspect, but like I said, I don't want to get off on rental types or how they do this, but you did describe the process of your vetting process, correct?
That's correct.
All right, thank you. Move on to, is there Mary Halstead? Oh, okay, not a problem, ma'am. A Mike Hoyt?
Hoyt, H-O-Y-T.
Thank you. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you are about to give will be the truth?
I do.
Go ahead. Thank you, sir.
I have 2 quick questions and a statement.
Sure.
Question number 1 is for the mayor, and you referred to developments that had been shut down. What criteria did you use specifically when you shut those down in contrast to these other developments?
We had 3 national builders approach the village. We get approached by the village and a variety of different builders. The fact that some builders wanted to do entire rental subdivisions, you weren't just talking about 100 units, you're talking 2, 3, 4, 500 units at a time. You're talking single-family homes, which based on some of the school data, at that point you're talking 2, 3, 4 kids per household, which would have had a much larger impact to the school system and as the community as a whole. Many national builders that have approached us in this aspect have said the same concept. That is the trend. They're moving into that. They didn't want to sell. They wanted to run entire rental subdivisions. At that point, we did not feel that is an appropriate fit. This project brings a balance, we felt. It brings a little bit, and as I've already mentioned, it does afford us some opportunity for some different retail. It has some owner-occupied units, and it has some rental aspects in there. So by far smaller scale versus a 1,000-unit apartment complex. We're talking about 148-ish type rentals in there. So you're looking at 10 buildings that would be rentals. You got 9 buildings that are owner occupied. So smaller scale appears to be more balanced. And I'll go back to further add, this project, where we're sitting, was designed as Shorewood's town center. The village has always been lacking a downtown. Here's an opportunity to create a city center type atmosphere, downtown atmosphere, call it what you will. It's walkable, it's scalable, it fits. My opinion.
Okay. Based on those numbers, I am looking at a project here that I think is about 75% of this whole project is our rental units. So I think I did the math, I might be wrong, but I think it's like 203 rental units. Am I correct? Oh, so it's in the 200s. So just around 200.
So 203 is if you assume that 33 units are in the second mixed-use building.
Okay. So again, like most of this project is rental in contrast to those other developments. It's still a majority of rental units. One other thing that I've heard in our conversations is mention of downtown Plainfield. I've heard comparisons to like we want it to be like a Burridge or a Naperville, that downtown feel. But one thing that when I look at those downtown areas, I see the mixed-use buildings. I do see those. But what I don't see are 148 rental homes around it. So when we contrast to what's happening in other villages, I think that's an important aspect to take note of, is that, yeah, there are mixed use, there are shops underneath, but not 148 rental units.
Downtown Plainfield has rentals right there in as well. Downtown Morris, as you referenced, downtown Burridge, Mokina, these are all different developments that have been approached, and they've been expressed during a comprehensive plan meeting that we had, and those are all different views and opinions that have been expressed.
Yeah.
Rentals do exist around those
Sure.
complexes as well.
In my statement that I'd like to make is I was once a renter.
Sure.
I remember in my 20s, I had an apartment in Palos Hills, and there was a time and place for that specifically. But one aspect that we're not talking about, we're talking about business opportunities, we're talking about safety, we're talking about traffic. One aspect that we're not talking about is community. And that's one thing that I love about Shorewood. I love the aspect of community. When my wife and I moved here 7 years ago, we fell in love with this neighborhood here in Shorewood Town Center. We loved to see the families and the children, the ability for the kids to ride their bikes on the street, the ability for, I look out into this crowd, I see probably 15, 20 people that I know by first name basis. We hang out together, our kids play together. There are clubs that we have in our neighborhood. There's a community element that we have that we love. But when we look at rentals specifically, you don't have that same investment in the community. A renter can come and go. When I was a renter in Palos Hills, I was not vested in the community. I could care less. I was there for 2 years. I knew that I was going to go. It was a short-term solution until I could find a more stable environment, or maybe to get married, have some kids, then buy a house where there's land, where the kids can run around, where they could play. But when I was a renter specifically, it filled my need, but I don't think there was any investment on my behalf in the community. And I'm not speaking for all renters. I have friends that are renters. But one thing that I do know is that when somebody's coming and going, and it's just short term, they're not going to be vested in the community. And that is what I'd like to share tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Mary Lee Cran.
Thank you. My questions have been answered. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Corey Krakowski? I do apologize for that.
He said you nailed it.
Yeah, I thought that was a little facetious.
No, you're all good.
For the record, please spell your last name, sir.
Krakowski.
Sure. And then Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you are about to give will be the truth?
I do. I feel like we just got married.
Yes, sir.
So I got a few questions. I'm ignorant on the subject of the traffic situation, so I was hoping you could clear that up, or someone could. I'm going to imagine that's going to be related to you, so we had a little talk last week. You guys had mentioned that the IDOT did not approve of a light at Windstone yet due to current numbers, correct?
They haven't seen any study for it yet. Now, we do look at the existing numbers, and the warrants aren't met. So IDOT has minimum warrants and criteria that have to be met before they would even consider a traffic signal.
And that was based on the study that they did?
That is based on just traffic counts in general. But with their study, our engineer, Christopher Burke, has already mentioned that the warrants will be met.
When is that exactly?
Well, they're projecting with their study that this development will meet the criteria for a traffic signal at 52 in Windstone.
In 2027?
When there is we can actually approach IDOT with a preliminary study, with their study, our study, putting it together, showing that this development will actually, with their traffic projections, will warrant a signal at the intersection.
How long are studies usually taken over as far as conducted? Days?
For us, it would be about 12 months.
The study that was in the packet indicated it was conducted over 1 day. Is that accurate?
Just for a count, yes.
Okay, so that count was actually conducted on April 13th of 2021, which was during COVID. I have a count from here, your guys' village notice that day indicating that you guys had even mentioned on April 13th of 2021, that exact day, due to the outbreak of COVID-19, the village of Shorewood is permitting but discouraging in-person attendance at village meetings. Those meetings will be required to be social distancing, no more than 50 people permitted. So at that time, COVID was active, and we're doing the count for this. Is it for this specific project to move forward with? I guess I'm confused as to how that works and why we would use that study based in COVID.
The numbers will be higher. So the lower traffic count, we make assumptions, and those projections that we're looking at, now the numbers are going to be higher due to COVID.
Okay, so we're projecting based on those numbers, we're just increasing them?
That is correct. So industry, engineering standards, they make the assumptions that from
that study?
From any study.
Okay.
Okay.
And the weather that day, actually, I looked it up, which is pretty funny too. It was like 40 degrees outside, and it was raining from like 12 in the morning till 10 at night. So I would imagine the amount of traffic during that time on compounding with COVID would probably not have that many people, is what I would imagine. So my suggestion would be that they do another study to see how really this project will be affected. Another thing that I noticed, I don't know, Natalie, if you could do this, if you can go to the part where it shows the phases. So there's a phase 2A. When is that 2A going to be completed? Or is it after 2?
So it can be built while phase 2 is being built. And we're okay with them starting it when phase 2 is built. The reason we put it separate is because although phase 2 doesn't, essentially, they may be still under construction in phase 2 when they move on to phase 3.
You know what I'm
right?
getting at, though? With all the traffic that's going to be coming from phase 1, phase 2, and potentially phase 1A, which is going to be amount of, let me see how many units, 118 units are going to be driving down Windstone.
Right.
So that's going to be a big issue.
So there's essentially, and it looks like you have some responses too, but essentially calling out phase 2A specifically was to make sure that we had a specific target date in there for the amenities for the residents, including the clubhouse and the pool. I believe that once they get started on phase 2, they're actually going to do all of the grading and start putting in the roads, but we wanted a specific hard stop that if they didn't have that done, they couldn't go any further.
Well, why don't they just build the road and then build phase 2 so that we can get out of the neighborhood without all having to get out where the construction traffic is at?
And they will build it at the same time. We just want them to be completely finished before they get too far along.
completely finished with phase two?
with Phase 2A.
So how long is phase two and phase one going to be coming out of Whinstone for, roughly? Or Whinstone, I'm sorry, I'm pronouncing that wrong.
I'll let them answer that from the perspective of what their schedule is. The reason Phase 1 is separate is because it's going to be serviced by a different stormwater pond, and then by the time they move on to Phase 2, they're going to have to do some major improvements and build a larger pond.
So
that's
is it a
held separately.
financial issue or a logistic issue?
Oh, go ahead and I'll let you answer it.
I think it's always all those things.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. We're building phase 1 first. There are logistics to phase 2 because of the pond issue that has to be figured out. Our hope's to build it as fast as market allows us to build it, but I would expect phase 2 will probably start earthwork and construction on at the end of next year. Phase 1 this year, phase 2 next year. So it probably straddles between 23 and 24.
Okay, so phase two will be completed, let's say 23 and a half, and then when would that road be completed then roughly?
Probably at that time.
At that same time?
Yep.
Okay, so people will be moving into phase two, and there will be a way for them to get out of the neighborhood at the same time?
That's the hope, yes.
Perfect. Okay, and then my next question is regarding that study that you guys provided. There's typically a no build if this project never went through, and then there's a build that happens where they decide if this project goes through, if the numbers go up, they grade it in a specific scenario. What doesn't happen is there's no study done during like 2024 where all of these cars will be coming out of just Whinstone in general. So that's why my suggestion is to have another study to determine whether or not the traffic is going to be too much for that area, especially on a day where maybe it's sunny out and maybe longer than just one day for a count. And I don't know if that's how things are done, but that would be my suggestion. I might be talking too long. I apologize if I am. Can I continue? I have a few more questions.
You can try to keep them moving along. We still got a lot of people that want to speak.
Okay, so did anyone get any superintendent's thoughts from the school districts that all these students are going to be coming to?
We met with the 3 superintendents for the school district and went over the projects with them.
And they thumbs up?
I mean, we went over the tables. I think that they understand this study that was done in 1996. One of the superintendents actually, referred to that as a good source for looking at to determine the number of kids. I believe that they felt that, getting the impact fees and everything was important, but didn't expect to necessarily get too many kids out of a multifamily development. They acknowledge the fact that there are different calculation standards used for multifamily homes compared to single family, which tend to generate more students.
And did the fact that the townhomes are geared towards older individuals affect that count at all?
So in certain developments, such as Shorewood Glen, the developer will ask to have the fees entirely waived, the impact fees entirely waived, since there won't be any students generated. In this case, they're not asking for a waiver or anything like that. They're using the standards that are set forth in the plan as though they weren't geared towards older people.
A librarian on our way out of the last meeting indicated that they had requested the reduction of the impact fees from the library.
So I wasn't personally at that meeting. I believe from the library and the fire district, they would like to have reductions based on their density and the number of money they would generate. That's really not something the village is going to do. That's something that if the library and the fire district tell us they're okay with that, we'll certainly come back and talk about it. It was my understanding they would not be requesting any relief from the school districts. Is that correct, Mr. Maddox?
So just no school districts, but you will be requesting from the fire district and the library, correct? Yes. Okay. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Is there a Katie? Is it Katie McBride? No? Katie McBride? All right, we'll move on to a Ryan M. on maybe Peyton Terror? Oh, there you go. Can you spell your last name for the record, sir?
Yes, sir. M-C-K-E-O-N-E.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you are about to give will be the truth?
I do.
Thank you, sir. Go ahead.
So, we've heard a lot of different aspects tonight. I'm going to ask a little bit about cosmetic stuff. Can you tell me where the construction entrance is at? Construction entrance.
So we're having some conversations about whether it would be appropriate for a construction entrance to come off of 52. At this point, we're expecting the construction entrance, though, to be off of Windstone because it's a safer road for them to turn off of.
When you say they, are you talking about trucks? Building?
Everybody.
Okay. Do you see that as a problem?
Without a doubt, it's a concern, we acknowledge. But any project that went in there faces the same challenge.
It does, but you have other spots within this range of property to create a temporary road.
And that has not been ruled out.
Okay, fair enough. That's all
It
I
has not
ask.
been ruled out. And just as Ms. Engel said, that is all logistically discussions about getting, and again, it's about safe entry for
Right.
everybody.
Right, including those school buses going across Windstone.
100%.
Okay, thank you. The red area, that's future, is there a time frame on when that's supposed to start by?
There is not. That red area is not part of the plan. It's a separate property. So we do not have a time frame on that. Basically, we believe that having the road and the infrastructure in will make it more marketable and more likely that it gets developed. But, it is not part of this project. We do not have any applications yet.
Okay. So basically, we'll be looking at trees and grass in that area until that is plowed over and cleared. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. We saw in the presentation a lot of nice cosmetic aspects of this project. Thank you for doing that. I'm a proponent, and I've sat up here before at meetings, and Public Works Commissioner is familiar with me and my aspects of Public Works, and I'm going to ask you to spend a little more money. I heard some testimony that says that you accommodated some other developments with some additions, I guess you could say, or some upgrades. Lawyer Dave had mentioned earlier that we're here to talk about the PUD for Town 1 and Town 2. I live in Town 1. You're going to affect Town 1. You're going to connect paths to Town 1. Our paths around the village are a needed upgrade big time. It needs to be secured better, illuminated. It's about time we address that. We've talked to the mayor about it. I've talked to the previous mayor about it. I would ask, and I'd hope the village would consider that, and maybe a revision back to the developer, please. Spend a little bit more money there. Illumination and an upgraded path. The site layout, can you tell me where the pool and the dog run's gonna be, please?
So you see where the word clubhouse is?
Yes.
That little rounded area is going to be where the pool is, and the dog run is going to be off to the side of the clubhouse, I guess right below the E, right? Is that where you'd say, Mr. Mannix? And that's really, it's not really a dog park, it's more of a dog run, just a fenced-in area where the dogs can run loose.
Okay. So my concern is noise level, noise pollution. I don't want to be backed up to the amount of noise that multiple people in a pool could possibly bring. We saw what happened at Springbank not too long ago. Little concerned about that here too. I don't want to listen to dogs barking all day and night either. I'm a dog lover, but I don't want to hear it all day. So I would hope, again, the board would consider maybe figuring out another spot for that to be located or come up with some type of noise deterrence system, please. Lighting and security. I saw great lighting. How about security? Are cameras going to be up? That's another aspect I would hope we would upgrade. Also tie that into our village surrounding area, please. Again, spend a little bit more money. I know you're spending a lot, but a little bit more goes a long way. That's all I have.
Thank you. Is there a Beth Rios? And I may not have said the following, so if you can spell your proper last name for the clerk, please.
It's Stopka Rios, Stopka-Rios.
And then, do you solemnly swear the testimony you are about to give will be the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Go ahead.
I am a managing broker for Crosstown Realtors in Plainfield. I also live in Devonshire, so I am a resident. I love my community. I love my home. It's just a beautiful place to live. Being a realtor for 14 years, I see a huge need for, as the rest of the realtors have said, more development, and specifically rentals. And I, for one, would like to say I do have a little bit of a problem with a lot of the people saying, stigmatizing rentals. There's a real need for it. There is no reason to put down people that are renting. And I'm saying this as being a homeowner for the past 30 years. So I'm not saying it for my own personal. I just have a lot of clients, a lot of need for it. So there has been an increase in the past 5 years in Shorewood of 35.48% in the prices of homes, the median price. In Joliet, it's been a 41% increase in the past 5 years, and then specifically in Joliet, in Timber Oaks, it's been 44.5% increase. So the need for affordable housing for new developments to sustain all this is very important.
Thank you. Karen James. Spell your last name for the record, please.
James.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you are about to give will be the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Thanks. I thought it was going to be much later. I thought it was like on sheet 4. First of all, thank you so much, Mayor and Board of Trustees, for hearing all of us tonight and giving everybody an opportunity to speak. And thank you, Natalie, for a very detailed Plan Commission report. I was one of the people who actually read all of it, and all the detailed presentation tonight. I'm here tonight as a resident of over 10 years of the community and someone who's lived in the area for over 20 years and almost my entire life in Will County. So I am in support of this project. This project diversifies the housing stock in Shorewood that has become predominantly single-family homes. We have some townhomes and the condo and some duplexes around town. And this project will provide variety to our housing types that people like empty nesters, young professionals, and single parents are seeking. Even at my age, I could use less square footage in my house, and I have one of the smallest homes in my neighborhood. I could use less land on my lot. And you know, I've got, I have a child who will soon be out of the home. And looking for a place after college. And I would love to see him have an opportunity to come move back home if that's his choice, but certainly not in my home. And everybody needs to fly the coop sometimes. So I would say, I don't have a statistic like some of the people who came up here, but I know that a lot of my generation, us Gen Xers, we had to rent first. You know, housing has gone up over the years, and the interest rates were still higher when I got out of college and first got married, and higher, I mean 8, 9, 10, 11, 12%. And so we took the opportunity to rent. As a young couple, we learned how to maintain a home. We learned how to live together. We took that opportunity to pay off student loan debt, to get the things we wanted in our apartment, and learn how to maintain a home. And it was very important to us, and I know a lot of my friends did the same thing. So this, you know, it is very hard to hear, like the last lady said, it is very hard to hear people stigmatize renters and be negative on renters, because a lot of us in this room were renters at one point, and we were not bad neighbors, and we were part of a community. And I think that anyone who moves into town center knows what they're getting into. It is Shorewood Town Center. It has been the gem and the baby of the community. It's been the vision for years that the previous mayor started early in the 2000s. And even before that, going into those comp plans. So those are things that the community has said they wanted. this town center grew to be a much larger piece. So I think that this project gives the opportunity for town center to put a shovel in the ground again, and that's hugely important. Shorewood residents want commercial businesses, but we keep hearing them say that they don't want the housing that will support that. You can't close the doors after you move here again. Because we all were not residents of this town. This town was founded in 1957 with a very small number of people who can still claim to be residents. I'm staring at one of them. And, but the rest, and I've heard Trustee Kirkland say, well, we all didn't really necessarily want the growth, but you're our residents now. We're your neighbors. We're the people who support you in your election. And we're here for this community, and you guys all love this community. So this board and its staff have done many things to prove that they are proactive in transportation. Improvements like Route 59 at Black Road and the temporary bike path on Route 59, which we've just recently turned into a permanent one. Thank you, Mayor. And so I see no reason why the staff and this board would not continue to be proactive in the details and making sure that this is a great development. So I am wholeheartedly in support of this project, and I really encourage you to approve this with, of course, any concerns addressed in your agreements and documents as you go forward. So thank you again for the opportunity to speak tonight.
Thank you. Kevin Blackburn? Can you please spell your last name for the record, please?
B-L-A-C-K-B-U-R-N.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you are about to give will be the truth?
Sure.
Go ahead, sir.
All right. Despite the dictionary definition, I think to even be openly referring to this as mixed use is disingenuous at best, patronizing at worst. It is large-scale, dense residential, the likes of which Shorewood has never approved before, at least on this scale with rentals. Most agreements between a developer and a municipality have some degree of symbiotic relationship. This one, it seems like the developer is getting 220 units plus to develop, pretty good deal. And it seems as if the municipality is getting the headaches that come with density and a couple restaurants. Maybe Super Mario can do the plumbing and go eat at the restaurant, right? Like it doesn't seem like the village is getting the same symbiotic growth that the developer is getting out of this deal. If the proposal is to sell, it's almost as if we're trying to put lipstick on the pig of what was pretty summarily dismissed by the vast majority of residents a couple years ago, which the developer withdrew before it came to to the board. But this seems as if it's just kind of the same thing disguised with, oh, there's some nice restaurants with it. Like it just seems as if it's different packaging on, there certainly changes, but different packaging on a deal that the will of the people pretty roundly swatted down. If the proposal is to sell 72 and rent out 148 for a total of 220 units, I urge you to demand more of the developer. If they see a market where they can sell 72, surely, maybe the answer isn't 220, but the answer is surely more than 72. The village should demand this. This is the first real proposal to get this far since this property was reimagined several years ago by the village, is no longer being exclusively commercial, and that's fine. But please don't be so desperate as to just feel the need to accept the first real proposal to get this far. I urge you. You don't have to be so careless to give it a no forever. Absolutely not. But you don't have to be, we don't have to see this as the right vision for Shorewood right now. Finally, I would caution you to take anything told you by realtors with a grain of salt. Not all. Many of them are good people. I know a lot of great realtors, many of them tonight, fantastic people. But they say these are geared for seniors, and there's half of them on the second floor. They ignore the issues on school impact. 7 years ago, they sold this board on the prospect that the market in Shorewood Town Center, Phase 1, wouldn't dictate McMansions, they used the word. The square footage had to be reduced. And after much struggle, the square footage was marginally reduced. And what do we see over the last 7 years? But homes in Shorewood Town Center selling for, on average, well over the 2,000 square feet. They were wrong. They can be wrong again. Just keep that in mind when you hear the expert opinion here and here. Just keep that in mind. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Patrick Gord? One more time. Is there a Patrick? Looks like Gord? All right, we'll move on. Eric Cottrell. Down to a couple more.
Cottrell, Cottrell.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you are about to give will be the truth?
I do.
Go ahead, sir.
What I've come to realize today, it's a lot easier to discuss and disagree on real estate than it is politics. I want to thank all of my neighbors that came here to speak civilly. That was fantastic. Thank you for the board for being here. I don't envy your position at all. I've lived in the area. I grew up in Plainfield Township my entire life until we moved here in about 6 years ago. When I lived in Plainfield Township, there was one high school. When I graduated, there was one high school. The downtown that we envisioned had the bones, but not the business. Everything came with growth and with change. Everybody in Plainfield was upset when they built a McDonald's and a Burger King. The change that came along with it and the growth, I think we can all agree hindsight is 2020. I'm a supporter of this proposal, and I hope that you take it in consideration.
Thank you. We got the last couple here. Is there Tracy Oswald? Can you spell your last name for the record, please?
Caswell.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you are about to give will be the truth?
I certainly do.
Go ahead, ma'am.
Have all of you, I was late, have all of you made that oath as well tonight?
Excuse me?
Have you sworn to tell the truth as well, everyone?
We did as elected officials, ma'am.
Okay, great. Natalie, I have several questions, and my first question is for you. During the break, I asked for clarification on the impact fees, and you told me the impact fees and a 50% land discount equals a total of $125,000. Correct?
Not exactly. So for the school district, there are two fees that the developer will pay. The first one is a fee that is designed, so let me back up for a second. Typically, the way the code is written is that a developer has to donate school land and park land. And in lieu of donating the school land and park land, they have the option, if we agree, to pay the cash value of that land. So as they get each building permit, they will pay their pro rata share of what it would cost for land to build school to accommodate that many students. They will also pay an impact fee to the school district. They are paying 100% of the fees to the school district, which I calculate it being about $125,000 among the three of them. As I mentioned,
that's great then. So that answers the impact fee part of the question, correct?
Right, and I can answer the 50% reduction if you'd like.
Let's just stick with the impact fees right now, if we may, if that's agreeable to you. So my question is for you, Mr. Maddox. Have you, Mr. Maddox, or any of your agents or counsel requested reduction of the impact fees as indicated on the 2017 impact fee summary by any of the governing bodies, including but not limited to schools, Minooka, Troy, Joliet, the Shorewood, Troy Public District Library, the fire department, the forest preserve, perhaps the police department, etc.? Yes or no?
So I think it was answered earlier that yes, there was a request for a reduction from the Troy Public Library District and from the Troy Fire Protection District.
Okay, great.
There was also thought earlier on in the process that Mr. Maddox would be requesting relief from the school district, but when we looked at the actual impact and the fees, I think he decided that he wouldn't bother asking for that it was a fair amount that he would be donating, and he wasn't going to ask for that.
Okay, so we have 264 residents that you told me during the break. I asked you for clarification on that. Is that correct, that 264 residences in the plan?
It could be up to 275, and that number is an up to number because we put a maximum number that could be built on the second mixed-use building. So it could be a little bit lower than that, but 275 is the maximum number of residences.
So let's just stick with the 264, okay? So the library impact fees are $425 per residence. The fire department impact fees are $1,125 per residence, for a total of $409,000 in impact fees. And the villages, you're willing to pay all of that to the library and the fire department?
Well, we have asked for a reduction from the fire department of 50% of that impact fee. So, that's not been worked out yet.
So if the fire department votes no on the reduction of the impact fees, are you willing to pay, and I'm sorry, I didn't do that math, 1,125 times 264?
If I could just jump in, the agreement that we have provides that he will pay those fees.
So you're committed to that,
And-
yes?
And it also provides that if the district decides to lower them, the village would accept that lower amount. But there's no, there's no reduction in the agreement. It's completely up to the fire district or the library district. Do they want to pay, do they want to reduce their fees?
Okay, so-
If they do, fine, and if they don't, our agreement provides that he will pay them.
Okay, could you just say that for the record, that you will agree to pay them at the rate as indicated on the 2017 Shorewood, Illinois Development Impact Fee Summary?
It's written in the agreement,
Look,
ma'am.
the agreement.
Just say it for the record.
That's not, but you're asking them to misstate what's going on.
If
And
the
would
governing
you let-
bodies don't,
Look,
go ahead, Mr.
You're
Silverman.
asking him to misstate what his agreement is with the village. His agreement with the village, if it's approved by this board, is that he will pay all the fees. If any district chooses to waive their fees, then they will waive them. So that's the agreement that's being proposed. It's nothing else.
Okay, again, if those bodies don't agree, you are still 100% willing to pay them as indicated?
Ma'am, it's in the annexation agreement.
Why do you not want him to just say yes
It's
or no?
already in the document, ma'am.
Okay, you've all heard it then. My next question is for all of you. In the spirit of full disclosure, Mr. Mayor, trustees, village employees, will you each affirm tonight that you or any of the companies or your family do not have an interest in, nor will you not bid on or accept contracts associated with this project?
I sense that's targeted at me, which is
No,
fine.
not you. No, all of you.
So I got no problem admitting to this. I am not affiliated. I do not do that type of construction work. I have no vested interest in this deal whatsoever. And I will not take any participation in this project.
Okay, and the rest of you? None of you?
Nobody else is running a construction company or anything that ties to that. So I'm sensing that is aimed at me.
No,
but I
it-
will
it-
have full disclosure to tell you. As I said, I have no participation and I will not participate in any construction activities with this project.
Okay. And that was not, just for clarity, that was not just addressed to you, to be honest. It was addressed to all of you.
I'll make a statement that I have no way of doing anything possible with this project, other than to sit
Thank you,
here
Mr.
and
Luciano.
decide whether I'm for it or not. So I will definitely tell you, I will not make one penny from this project unless I find it on the ground when I'm walking through it.
The only thing you're getting is a headache tonight.
Would we be permitted to?
You do, as the attorneys mentioned earlier, let's stay focused on this project.
Well, let's, and for the purpose of this conversation, while there are things I don't like about it, I do realize that there is a need for mixed, and I don't know the correct way to, costs of residencies in the village. It's not what I would choose, but I fully expect that you all will vote for it, and that's why I wanted to ask those questions tonight. I do have one more, and this is for Mr. Maddox and Kipling. Have you requested or been offered any tax benefits or tax reductions for this project?
No.
Okay, great. Thank you, everyone.
No problem, thank you. Is there a Kim Miller? This should be our,
Can I say one more thing? May I? I'll make it real fast.
real quick, because I want to move on.
I'm an elected official. I sit on the Troy Library Board. And the property that was mentioned tonight, I don't remember who said something. The village has approached us about selling the property. We haven't sold it yet. I don't know that in the referendum has not passed. I don't know that a library will be out here, but we're holding out hope that it will someday.
Thank you. And then the last speaker that was here, Kim Miller. She had to leave? All right, with that point, that'll conclude our public comment section. If you didn't... What name, sir? I do apologize. You were at that first of that list. Go ahead. I apologize.
That's Oostema, O-O-S-T-E-M-A.
And before you start, I do apologize. I missed your name at the
You're
top
fine.
of that list. And do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth?
I do.
Go ahead, sir.
All right, we talked about the stress on the schools. My wife teaches for Troy. Is the whole board here aware that 8 teachers share 4 rooms at Troy Shorewood? 2 teachers share the stage as their classroom. And you think adding 23 more students possibly to that is a good idea? I believe his name, Jim, was talking about the infrastructure and try to fix our actual school problem. It's not going to affect my boys. All 3 of my boys are going to go to Minooka next year, Minooka High School. So we're just passing the buck down the line. They said, the slide said there's 23 students. That's only 1 out of the 5 units of the 148 units would have a kid. I think that's grossly underestimated. Secondly, I'm just going to keep jumping around so I can be quick. The senior living area. I think if we think there's anybody who's having senior living on a 2nd floor, we should require them to have an elevator, bring that up there. That is going to put extra stress on EMS getting up there to work with residents who are up there. My main problem is with the rental units, especially the ones right there on 52. We're losing that frontage where we could have possibly better tax revenue coming in for the area. I live in Fox Bend. I've been there for 15 years. The 3-4 homes in our area right now that are rentals are the worst kept houses in the area. On top of that, I have a unique position. I'm a Joliet fireman. I have been in every single apartment complex, Essington to Briggs. The larger the area, the complex, the more problems there are and the more rundown they are. So don't say it's not going to affect the properties around here. I lived in one in '99 when I moved to the area. I quickly moved out of it and found a mixed-use one where I was living above it because I saw the problems in there. My father-in-law lived down the block from one of those. He moved 5 years ago because his property and his neighborhood has changed. Joliet had an issue where a lot of good people moved out of the area because they weren't going to put up with all the rentals. And I don't want to see the same thing happen to Troy. Finally, if you want to have the rental units, maybe scale it down. Find a different area for other rental units. Don't have a cluster of buildings. It's only going to cause problems. Don't lose that frontage on 52 and make the best decision for the town. But a large cluster of buildings, I can tell you I've been in multiple ones. You don't want that in the town. It is going to change the dynamic of the area. And that's it.
Thank you. All right, that's all. That was everybody that we had signed up to speak for this evening. So we will. What's that? Did you not mark anything? Did we already call you?
Matt, is there another page?
What name, ma'am? Go ahead, though. I don't have you entered. Go ahead.
My name is Patty McGrath, last name
Oh,
is.
I think we called her earlier in.
Oh, you did? I
We
didn't hear you
did.
call her.
Yeah, we called I couldn't read the penmanship, so, but we called you right about 9:20,
Okay, all right.
9:30. So
Okay.
I apologize there then. Go ahead.
I guess, my name's Patty McGrath, capital MC, capital GRATH. I do.
Solemnly swear to testify you're about to see will be the truth?
I do.
All right, go ahead.
All right, so I see the board, and I see that it's going to be a difficult situation for you, difficult vote, I would imagine. It does appear, though, that you're pretty much sold on this. And I'll tell you, initially, I was like, not for it at all. I think it's beautiful. I think that it is. But I guess I am still concerned with the apartments and what that can bring to our Shorewood. And I almost would be more into the mixed use apartment buildings, because I think that it would generate more people who could come in and rent above. Plus, it would generate more businesses that, as you're saying, the survey said they want like a downtown Plainfield or Naperville. It would present that more like that. And I'm also very concerned about where we are economically. This is a large project for the village and for you. It's a large project. And I have seen in the past what has happened when all of a sudden a recession hits. And as everybody knows, in the building, I mean, if you know, it's hard to get the building material too and get it in on time. And I think it's a big consideration to take on at this time. And I guess that's really, what I want to say. I just think that, and my last thing is that I know that I emailed you and the whole board and everything, and I hope you consider what people have said. And yet, I know that you have to look at the big picture, and I'm ignorant maybe more in the big picture, but I do thank you for your time, and I do hope that you can really look at what your residents want too. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're going to move into board comments. At this point, is there anybody from the board that wants to address the petitioner?
I just want to say you're missing a page of signatures because Judith Uphues and Sidney DeRobertis were at the bottom of a page. But we are both going to pass because of the time. But we're there.
All right, we'll make notes. All right, thank you. Any board members that want to address the comments to the petitioner?
I would, Mayor.
Go ahead, sir. Go ahead.
A couple questions, because I think there was reference about it's easier to have rentals than to sell the units. I know the rentals are being individually pinned, but the townhomes are kind of like a condo almost, the way they're layered. They're not a traditional townhome. So why do you feel you can't sell one, but you can sell the other?
Well, I think the simplest way to put it, Trustee Selfridge, is that when we're doing the land plan and looking at the product mix or opportunities, I mean, I think our first preference and the best economics for the project is that it would all be rental. But we recognize that with the lakefront that we're going to have, there was an opportunity to have, lakefront owner-occupied homes. And so that was the reason for introducing those in. It's really to take advantage of the lake. Again, it does provide a variety of different mix into the housing stock that really isn't available anywhere else at kind of that scale, style, and price point. So
your preference would have been to rent them all? You're saying the
Yes,
preference would...
I think, yeah, the economics of the project work better that way.
Gotcha. Okay.
There's very little margin or profit to be made on the for sale of those units, but because of the lake, they can be sold and be profitable.
Okay. Is there anything in the leases that prevent, like, could somebody go buy 5 of the townhomes and then rent them? Or is there anything, I guess, in your guys' agreements for homeowners that buy them to rent them out? Like sublease?
Yeah, we would only sell the for sale townhomes to individuals that were going to move in. We would not sell them for someone to rent the whole building or something, if that's your question.
That is my question, because you said, I think that those would be protected by an HOA, so the HOA wouldn't allow subleasing, or that would be part of that agreement?
Well, the HOA, once they establish what they're doing, that they'll make their own rules. But as far as when Kipling sells them, we will be selling them to an occupant user of the units. What happens if they resell down the road, just like if somebody buys a house and he sells it down the road, it's up to the individual owner to decide what they want to kind of do.
Okay. And then I might have missed at the planning and zoning meeting because I wasn't there. What is the timeline for completion for the whole project? Is it 3 years, did I hear? Is that correct?
Yeah, 3 years is probably the optimistic end, more likely 4.
Okay. And then I think one of my questions is maybe for our village attorney. As far as the leasing, they mentioned, holding standards, no grills on balconies, no certain window treatments. That's in their lease, but how do we make sure that they enforce the lease?
I mean, it's really difficult. I mean, really, we don't. And I think we've seen some problems that we've gotten into with different HOAs trying to enforce smaller issues. I mean, I think at some point you have to take them at their word. I mean, we can't send the police or the code enforcement over and say, you've got a bicycle on your patio. It's difficult to do from an enforcement end, and we really trust that the owners and eventually an HOA, when they take over, if they take over, enforces those covenants. I mean, they're really private covenants that, we sort of depend on people to enforce, but it would be difficult for government to enforce them.
Okay. That was all I have there. Thank you.
Trustee Luciano, anything?
No, I would just say at this time, and we are not saying a lot because we've been going through this for the last 3 or 4 years. Many of the questions that you're raising and concerns you've raised, we've presented that to the staff and we've tried to work that out. As a matter of fact, even today we were talking about situations with the traffic situation there. When I grew up in an area that I grew up in, 90% of the residents there lived in apartments. I think in a mile square area, I can only remember 3 people who lived in a home. And, you talk about community, people getting involved. I thought I came from a community that was real involved with everyone. I could go 2 miles away from where I lived, and if anything was done wrong, before I got home, my parents knew about it. So that's the kind of community I grew up in. We have somewhat, looking at, as one of the realtors mentioned, that the connotation about the people who move in apartments. Over the last week since we've been talking about this, I went around to different people and asked them, how many of you bought, when you moved out of your parents' home, how many of you bought a home? All of us started out in apartments. We're all good people. There's a bad element that comes in no matter what you do. You can make them $100,000 a unit for rent, but you're going to get a bad element come in. And the thing is, whatever we're doing here, yeah, there's a lot of good things about it, but there's a percentage of it that's not good. But that's what we rely on staff and developer to work out. We've been talking about the traffic situation. If we don't get a stoplight or we can't get the speed limit lower, that we're looking to ask the staff to come up with some other ideas until that happens. So again, we have to look at this from the perspective of our community. This is a key part of finishing the development of the town center. This could spin off into finishing the entire center, maybe Town Center 2, and maybe getting the retail area up in front there. And that completes our downtown, which is something that we've all been trying to do. And with that being said, you know, I don't know what the result of this vote's gonna be when we do vote. But I think that, you know, together as a community, working together, that this can be a very positive thing for everyone. And that's all I have to say.
Trustee Carroll, anything?
Yeah, I have one question. On the rental apartments, like a two-bedroom, what's the maximum amount of people that you would allow to reside in those apartments? Is there a number?
I believe it's 4.
Yeah, the answer is 4.
And the condos would be the same? Or?
The for sale townhomes along the lake, trustee?
All the rentals?
The rental, the 2-bedroom, all the rentals are 2-bedroom, 2-bath. And the maximum capacity is 4 people living in those. But on the for sale units, those are just sold. We do not control or govern how many people are in that family.
Okay, so if they have more than 2 kids, a couple, you would not rent to them?
Correct, yes.
Okay. I mean, one of the concerns I have is the traffic.
Sure.
I've shared that on 52. Staff has reassured me that they will do what needs to be done to try to expedite that with IDOT. So that's all I have.
Trustee Kirkland, any comments, questions?
My only comment would be that I've been a resident of Shorewood since before it was Shorewood. I've been here forever. I would never take anything like this lightly when it comes to me making a decision. And so I appreciate everybody that came up and spoke. I know it's not easy to come up to the podium, and I appreciate everybody's feedback because your input means a lot to me as well as I believe the board. And so I appreciate all that. The questions that I would have for the developer, I've been asking questions for weeks and weeks and weeks, and I don't think I have any more right now. Not to say I won't, but I don't right now. So.
Thank you. Trustee Brockman?
Thank you, Mayor. I echo those words also. Just a couple of things. Council, do you concur with what the attorney said about the interpretation of those 2 laws?
Yeah, I would go back and look at it again, but I remember, I think Trustee Luciano pointed out to me that new law, and we had a discussion about it. And as I recall, that was my interpretation of it, but I will go back and take another look at it.
Does a voucher supersede a credit rating?
The Act does not speak to that. What the Act requires is that, and I have the language right here, if a landlord requires that a prospective tenant or current tenant have a certain level of income, then the landlord shall subtract any source of income in the form of a rent voucher or subsidy from the total of the monthly rent prior to calculating if the income criteria have been met. So the Act only requires that to the extent that there is this income determination based on what the rent is, that voucher has to be applied in that fashion. Quite candidly, the Act is silent on the effect of a credit rating and to the extent whether that would trump something like this or not. Quite honestly, that's a common thing we run into with new laws. My personal opinion is, and the way that the Act is worded, leads me to believe that as long as a voucher is treated in this fashion as expressly required by the Act, a landlord is free to apply all of their other requirements the same way that they would to anybody else.
Somebody mentioned, I think in the letter that Lana read about the beautiful trees out front. Well, if somebody wants to go out there and start digging them up, because that's, I mean, there's nothing worse than those trees.
You're right.
And that was like the beautiful trees in front of Jewel.
Yeah, yeah. And somebody else mentioned the property would be better suited for commercial. Well, mind you, that property's been sitting there 20 years and nothing has come until this project. So I do want to ask Kipling representative something. The ones that are present, if this project gets approved by this board, it will depend on you to make the village proud. Mokina, Frankfurt, Tinley Park, Orland, they all have large rental complexes and all are doing a great job. Now it could be our turn, and I'd like the assurances from you made to this board and to the public here that's watching that proper management will be accomplished. We're depending on you if this is approved.
And, you know, we're the local developer. We've been doing this for 35 years in this community. We've developed Fox Bend, the Hunt Club, Shorewood Glen, Westminster Gardens, Lake Forest. You know, there's just so many that we've developed over the years. The first People First Bank, the Brook Forest Shopping Center for Crispy Waffle. These are all things that we've done because we live here. My family lives here. I've lived here most of my life. I went to Troy grade school. So we have pride. We see our customers, the people that we've built for. I see people when I go to a restaurant and I built their house 40 years ago. And I pride myself into being not ashamed of anything that we've done. So this development, as all of the developments that we brought, whether it was Del Webb and that was going to be, an over 55, there was controversy with that. There was controversy when we did Walnut Trail and we donated a 20-acre school site for the Walnut Trail grade school in Minooka. Kipling Estates had so many different types of neighborhoods from the Devonshire, 55 and older marketed community to the Fieldstone that had courtyard products to the different types of single-family neighborhoods. We brought $1 million houses into town, and that's what's in Lake Forest in a lot of places. So we've had a lot of diversity, and we seem to be cutting edge at the time that we come here and ask the board for an approval of this or that. This is one of those times. We know the market, we know it well. I welcome everyone's questions and their input. To get clarity for everyone. I'd also ask that we don't need a vote tonight. If the board so chooses, we could table this for a second read. I think it's in 2 weeks or give or take, whatever that is. Just so everyone has more time to contemplate all the different things that have been raised. I think as this meeting versus the Planning Commission meeting, a lot of things have gotten resolved. I think a lot of clarity has been brought to the public here. I welcome that. This is not to be any smoke and mirrors. This is clearly what we've done for 25 or 35, 40 years here, and we're proud of what we built.
Okay, very good, thank you. And I want to thank the crowd for being here tonight and also last Wednesday night. And it looks like we're not going to surpass that record of last Wednesday, but we're getting pretty close. So.
Give me a chance.
Well, I'm sure you'll be short, right? So anyway, thank you.
No problem. Trustee Chapman, any questions, comments?
Okay. 30 years, I'm going on 30 years on this board in other places. Actually, 50 years of being a resident in the same house. And other service, I was on Troy Fire Department for about 5 years. I'm still a Lions member for the village of Shorewood. And I've watched and been an intimate part of going from 3,500 people up to 18,000 people. And watched it and actually sat in meetings. And I will say one thing, because there's always comments about certain individuals and things. That I've dealt with Ed throughout this entire project. We've been involved and had meetings and sat down and talked about different items. I've been involved in the Jewel project, which took a little bit of heat at first, but you know, I won't tell you where I shop. I shop at different places, you know, just to be fair to everybody. But I don't think anybody wants to see the Jewel out of there, okay? I mean, I used to have to drive all the way into Joliet to shop. And that was foolish, you know. By the time I got home, that ice cream was melted, and you know. So the situation is that we watched them go in, and every time a change was made, people were apprehensive, and they thought, this is going to change my life. I watched the last big situation where I was sitting where the mayor is tonight is the Lenny's situation, and I do know that some people still don't care about that, and they're not appreciative of it, but the amount of business that it does and the kind of service it brings to that area of our village, I think is a very positive effect. I still haven't made up my mind, I will tell you that. I have not made up my mind on this project, and I'll tell you why. When I started talking about the town center shortly after being elected, and if anybody thought I did not run against Bertha Hofer, Bertha Hofer said, I don't want it anymore, and I tried to talk her into running. Okay? So, as I've heard rumors, you know. But the situation was, because I was a big supporter of Bertha Hofer, and I thought she was a wonderful lady and thought she did a tremendous job for this village. And she did. And I learned a lot from her. What I'm really going back to is that I've seen so much change in the village, and I've heard so many people come forward, and they all were apprehensive, almost to a person. And they thought, life is going to change, and it's going to change drastically. The only thing that's changed drastically is that we've put another 15,000 people into this town, and most of you are them. And I think you're happy about coming to Shorewood, and you're happy with what's available. I'm really leaning towards welcoming this next group that's coming in. And if they're renters, I mean, just like people talked about here, I started out as a renter in a 10-unit right after I got home from Vietnam. That's where we moved into, the wife and I and our children. And then we got an offer for a job out here, and we came out here. And when we found Shorewood, we thought we found heaven. It was a great place to be. I think it still is. And I don't think something like this is going to cause it to go downhill at all. I've listened tonight, I've talked to Mr. Lynch, me and him talked. We got it over. I even talked to the developer today, to be totally honest with you, because I told him that I was still hung up on this. And that's because when we first got the town center going and Coles said they were coming, I was in the office there dancing around. You know, I was going, oh, this is great. We're gonna have the big box come. It'll anchor all the other stores. We're gonna really kick this off. And I was the most disappointed individual in the world when they came back and said, we're not coming. I mean, that hurt. 2 years later, sitting there with the administrator, we said, you know what, that's probably the best thing that could ever happen. That didn't come, because we wouldn't have got what we wanted, and it, especially now, it would be empty. It would be a shell of a store sitting there, because they'd never build a big box this far away from an interstate, okay? So what I'm trying to say is I still haven't made up my mind. I would like to hear from any of you. You can get the phone number here at the village and give me a call personally if you want. But I'm definitely, this meeting was great. I thank the mayor. You people were great because the way you handled yourselves up here, I mean, when I was sitting over there, I was dodging bullets in the last one. And, you know, we had 3 undercover cops sitting out in the audience just to save me if I called for it. But this was great. And I'm so proud of just being a resident and being here this long and serving the village for as long as I had. And I hope to make a couple more years anyways out of it. So anyways, thank you. You can call, talk to me. I'll be glad to clue you in on some things, but don't think that this is going to change your life, because it's not. Guaranteed. Because nothing we've built so far changed mine, except I don't have to go to Joliet to buy a box of nails anymore. Okay? I can go right around the corner to Home Depot. So, have a good night, everybody, and God bless you. Okay? And thanks for what you guys are doing. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. So, some closing comments. You know, I'm not going to dwell on a lot of things that have been reiterated here this evening. As mentioned, and as Trustee Chapman was the mayor years ago, and it's already been touched on, the vision of the town center in 2006 incorporated this wonderful community out here to the west. And I think that's still viable. You know, I think we're fortunate that we didn't have a big box and a Kohl's that vacated. Now we've got a big shell sitting outside. I think there is opportunity here with development in these small shops that are here. You know, the term Olive Garden always likes to get thrown around. But we have that opportunity with these different retail components along Route 52. So any of those different things we have to consider. We always have to look out for the greater good of the whole. This village started off in about 3,500 residents. We're 18,186 currently. As many of these trustees have acknowledged, growth. Growth brings change. I know every one of us feared change. We approach it in our daily lives and how we want to handle that. So I think this is a good project. As mentioned, we had a variety of other developments come through that were not a good fit for us. I am going to ask, as we close the public hearing, that we leave this as a first read. We do not take a vote on this evening, and allow 2 weeks to digest any of the additional information and allow the opportunity for any additional clarity regarding traffic or anything of that nature. Lastly, it was mentioned at one point regarding Route 52. I want to make sure everybody is aware, Route 52 is being widened from Route 59 to River Road, that's going to be a 7-lane wide intersection. That's happening. State of Illinois is working at phase 1 engineering, Noriel, correct? We're completing that now. So Route 52 is being widened to accommodate growth. It's coming. It's here. Ridge Road is going to be your next major north-south thoroughfare. There's a reason we see those 5-lane roads going up in Minooka and coming through Joliet. The section that falls within our development agreement is the last section to be widened. Those are all things that this board is taking into consideration and how we get there. We are going to push, and from speaking with our engineers, if this project is approved, we meet the threshold to qualify for a stoplight at Whinstone and 52. This village board and previous boards have already taken the necessary steps to create Route 52 in Whinstone for a traffic signal improvement. It's something we've budgeted for. We want it. We want to help provide that for the community. In addition, I have a meeting with IDOT next week, and I am pushing for a speed reduction from County Line Road down. We know right now it's a 50-mile-per-hour speed limit that comes into town, and it doesn't reduce till it hits Del Webb Boulevard. I also can, as many of you are aware, IDOT is looking at Route 52 and County Line Road as being a roundabout. So we can already acknowledge with the state that there is a traffic concern at Route 52 and County Line Road. We are going to emphasize that concern, that they're willing to acknowledge there is a safety concern on Route 52 with a 50-mile-per-hour speed limit, and emphasize as much as we can to get a reduction in speed from County Line into our town. I don't know how well it's going to go, but I'm going to fight for it. With that, I want to close the public hearing. And as we close the public hearing, again, when we move into the regular order of business for the village, I ask that we leave this as a first read from the village to allow staff and anybody from the public to reach out to the board for any additional clarity, and we can bring it back in 2 weeks. So with that, I ask that we close the public hearing. Dave, you want a motion to close that?
Yeah, let's do a motion to close.
All right, I'll
so
take a
it's
motion
clear.
to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
I got a motion by Kirkland and seconded by Luciano. Lana, can you give me a roll call for that, please?
Carroll,
Yes.
Chapman,
Yes.
Kirkland,
Yes.
Luciano,
Yes.
Selfridge,
Yes.
and Brockman.
Yes.
All right, the public hearing is now closed. All right, we can, let's move in real quick to our consent agenda for the evening. Approval. Pardon? No. Tonight's consent agenda, approval of the regular meeting minutes, July 26, 2022. Approval of accounts payable in the amount of $517,508.55. Approval of payments 9 and 10 to $1,853,054.72 to Pacific Construction. Approval in the payment amount of $39,940 to Sports Fields for the baseball field renovations. Are there any questions regarding consent?
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion Luciano, second Kirkland. Roll call, please.
Chapman,
Yes.
Kirkland,
Yes.
Luciano,
Yes.
Selfridge,
Yes.
Brockman,
Yes.
and Carroll.
Yes.
All right, consent's approved. Reports and communications have been covered. For this evening's order of business, on business item number 1 would have been the consideration for approval of an ordinance regarding the amendment of the annexation agreement for the Hamptons. I assume there's going to be no further discussion on item number 1. Agreed? We'll move on to item number 2. Consideration for the approval of the ordinance granting a conditional use regarding the PUD development. Yeah, I apologize. Regarding the PUD development in the Village of Shorewood, also referencing the Hamptons, this item was also up for a first read. I again assume everybody is comfortable with that. We will remain leaving it as a first read.
Correct.
All good? Moving on to business item number 3, consideration for approval of a resolution authorizing the execution of an intergovernmental agreement between the Village of Shorewood and Troy Consolidated School District for the sidewalk connection on Diana Park. Administrator Klima.
We've talked about this before. This is the relocation of Diana Park over by the school. We're providing for a walkway between Diana Street and the school. Everything is in the packet. I don't think anybody had any questions. If you do, I'll answer them.
Are there any questions regarding the sidewalk with the Diana Park as we discussed? If not, I'll take a motion to approve.
I'll motion the approval of a resolution authorizing the execution of an intergovernmental agreement between the Village of Shorewood and Troy Community Consolidated School District 30C for sidewalk connection to Diana Park.
I'll second.
Motion Selfridge, second Carroll. Roll call, please.
Kirkland.
Yes.
Luciano.
Yes.
Selfridge.
Yes.
Brockman.
Yes.
Carroll.
Yes.
And Chapman.
Yes.
All right, the IGA is approved. Item number 4 will be consideration for approval of an ordinance amending Title 6, Chapter 11, Section 302 of the Code of Ordinances for the Village of Shorewood, Will County, Illinois. This is Windstone Drive on Hunter Drive to Auburn Lakes. This item is up for a first read. I'm going to summarize this due to the time. This is a request to put no parking in front of the school on Windstone Drive, as mentioned in the proposed ordinance from Windstone on Hunter Drive to Auburn Lakes. This is very similar to what we already do on Verton Drive over along the Troy schools. We're trying to minimize cars from parking on Windstone during hours and whatnot. It just jumbles the flow of traffic through traffic, then gets in the way of school loading and unloading. So we're asking that we put a no parking zone just on Windstone in the front of the school. Are there any questions? Yes, sir.
Is that, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Is it only during school time period or all year round?
We're going to, in this one, we're going with all year round.
Okay.
There's no homes that back up to Windstone, and there's really no reason for anybody to be parked in front of the school.
Okay.
For matter of fact, it's trying to streamline that.
So this is permanent?
Yes, sir. Any additional questions?
One last
Yes, sir.
question. Did we talk to any of the residents about this that live right on Windstone?
I'll defer that to Natalie.
We did not. The houses on Windstone actually back up to the street, so if they had guests, they would tend to park on the other side. So we weren't too concerned that they would lose any parking.
No, I was just saying because their backyards are on that side of the street.
Oh, right. No, we didn't talk to them about that.
That's fine.
It's fairly rare to have anybody park there. They just have a couple of problems with parents parking and letting their kids run across the lawn and kind of in an unsafe manner.
The reason I mentioned that is during like the parades and stuff like that, or when you have an event at the parks there, they all park there. And in the summertime when school's not in, I don't know if is it wise maybe just to do it for the school year and not, you know, when the school's
The
closed.
signage doesn't allow for that, and the police aren't going to enforce it during that time, so it's really, it's not a problem.
All right. Well, I'm just mentioning it because
Yeah, sure. It's all good. This item is up for a first read, so if the board is so inclined, we can waive the second read.
I move to approve an ordinance amending Title 6, Chapter 11, Section 302 of the Code of Ordinances for the Village of Shorewood, Will County, Illinois, Windstone Drive to Hunter Drive to Auburn Lakes Drive, and waive the second read.
Second.
Motion Kirkland, second Carroll. Roll call, please.
Luciano.
Yes.
Selfridge.
Yes.
Brockman.
Yes.
Carroll.
Yes.
Chapman.
Yes.
And Kirkland.
Yes.
All right, that ordinance is approved. We are going to forego department reports for this evening. Unless there are any additional comments that a trustee would like to make. If not, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion Kirkland, second Selfridge. Roll call, please.
Selfridge.
Yes.
Brockman.
Yes.
Carroll.
Yes.
Chapman.
Yes.
Kirkland.
Yes.
And Luciano.
Yes.
All right, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
You do not get the damn.